What is up, everybody? This is Silver Spook, and this is the Silver Spook discusses the Woman King, which is a movie that checkmates Euro-Centrism. So we'll just get right to it. Queen's worth celebrating. If you haven't yet, definitely check out Woman King if you can do so. Um, give John Boyega and Viola Davis and the studios all the money that you can, because well, for one thing, lots of racists are trying to get people to stop watching this movie. Hashtag boycott Woman King was trending, and most of the people that were posting about it were people who had MAGA American flag hashtag 2A. Lots of Tucker Carlson posts in them. They're the people that are saying boycott the Woman King. I've looked into that. So if you take nothing else away from this, do check out this show, The Woman King. But we'll get into more of that. You don't know what The Woman King is? It is a movie starring Viola Davis, John Boyega. I think it was produced also by John and Viola, the two biggest names involved in it. But it's mostly all black cast. Of course, it's in Africa. It is a movie that is the 2022 American historical epic about a film about the Agoje, an all-female warrior unit who protected the West African kingdom of Dahomey during the 17th to 19th centuries. It's set in the 1820s, and the film stars Viola Davis as a general who trains the next generation of warriors to fight the enemies. So it's a movie that is it's definitely the opposite of Eurocentric, obviously. So it's a movie that centers the peoples of Africa, specifically the people of Dahomey, and specifically the women African warriors. The Dora Milaje in Black Panther are, of course, like directly related to, or that they're in the same spirit as these characters. I don't know if I've done a specific stream on YouTube about this topic, but I have an entire thread about the history of women warriors. And actually, since from everything I can see and I've seen of it, the trailer is amazing. I definitely recommend you check that out. I don't want to show it on here just in case we get in trouble. But just from the trailer, it's a movie that's not only like cinematically amazing, it's definitely like showcasing. Somebody brought up that a lot of times the lighter skinned to the darker skinned characters are often more in servile roles, servant roles, smaller roles, picking up the pieces, cleaning up, janitorial, just generally in Western cinema, period, in Hollywood. And then the more the higher the salary, the further up the pay grade you elevate yourself to, and the further up the feudal totem pole, and the feudal ranks that you ascend, the lighter the skin characters you have. The Woman King kind of reverses that, where it's like the darkest of the characters are, of course, because it's not a Eurocentric movie. It's because it's not a white exceptionalist. It is not a Euro centered movie. It's all that's kind of reversed. I think Black Panther is probably, of course, like another movie that's a big, well-known movie that's close to it. But the difference being, that's still a Marvel. It's a comic book movie. It's a lot of it's it's made up. There is no Wakandan country, whereas this is actually based in history. So that does make a difference. Of course, it's a story that it takes cinematic and dramatic liberties, to tell a good story, but it's not having a thing that's not fantastical, not science fictional, not comic book, is very important. So let's get this. Okay. So I'm just refreshing some things. But anyways, I think that so The Woman King is a show that is definitely doing something. It's unprecedented. I was reading another review that was basically saying that nothing really exists on par with this. There's not really a story. There are no Hollywood stories. There are stories set in Africa. Like I was bringing up the a couple streams ago. There are things like Hotel Rwanda. There are things like Beasts of No Nation. But those movies are about, the suffering of Africa, African violence against other Africans, and those are, they don't really showcase the importance of the presence of colonial occupiers, of the violence, the bigger violence of European invasions, right? A lot of, like, even the concept of scalping is often like, oh, it's barbaric, violent, indigenous Turtle Island people. But scalping, the removing of the scalps of, all the horrors of Indians coming to my settler colonial Texas town and, killing us and taking our scalps off. But the thing is that's a narrative, and they did that in cowboy movies, and West Hollywood did this with westerns starring people like Clint Eastwood and John Wayne, right? With strong white male protagonists with guns stopping the savage Indians from removing their scalps, an innocent white scalps, and all their women and children's scalps. The thing is, but that again, that is a Euro-centric, that is a white-centric storytelling tactic, which is it basically, storytelling is what facts do you leave in, what facts do you take out, right? Because it's hard if everything was completely made up. It's just like, well, all the black people were giant 2,000-pound gorillas, and they're coming to destroy our great white civilization. Now, there are some people who believe there's 70-foot tall Antifa super soldier, Black Lives Matter fusions with like imagine like Megazord or Optimus Prime, but with a red, yellow, and green flags, and trans medications coming for your children or something. Some people actually believe that, but not the majority of people, right? There are some very diseducated, very ignorant people in the Western world, but they're not. But most people, you have to have mostly truth. But still, even within telling of history, right? In the history books and in the movies, right? Like John Wayne's movies, right? Or like Marvel movies, or like all movies, or even in books. What you choose, you can still lie using mostly facts if you just selectively omit certain facts, right? If you selectively omit certain pieces of information, like in the John Wayne movies, right? Or in the stories about Native Americans, right? Indigenous people in Turtle Island. If you just say indigenous people, were violent and, killed white people and took their scalps. Oh my God, we have to stop them. Let's put a guy on a horse and have lots of cops and have the military prepared to fight Indians, and let's civilize them by sending them out of boarding school. But then you select, but what they've selectively left out is the fact that it was European settlers who came to the United States who began the scalping. They put a price on their heads. It's $25 for a male indigenous scalp. It was $10 for a S slur, that we don't use that word, but that's a word that they use on their signs in the settler towns in Virginia, you name it, Massachusetts, etc. And it was $5 for a P slur for a baby indigenous person. So it was literally women, children, because those were easier to get. Andrew Jackson killed thousands, right? And he was elected president of the United States because of how many scalps he collected personally, right? He said, I did such a good job, right, committing genocide, that he literally was a genocide. He ran based on his personal genocide, right? So it sounds unbelievable, but then that's the actual history, right? But then if you omit the fact that it was, for centuries, white Europeans came to the United States, committed genocide of indigenous Turtle Island people, black slaves, to make all their money on. You omit the scalping that was part of that process, which was also tied to capitalism and the accumulation of wealth. If you selectively omit that fact and you just say, indigenous people started doing, basically indigenous people said, oh, this is what they do. Well, we're going to do some of that back to them because these people are horrible, nasty colonizers, like what they did in Africa, These people are being incredibly violent towards us. Because if you just say, well, African people were violent because one time African warriors, like played by Viola Davis, slashed some white people. African warriors were bloody. They killed the Europeans. They're terrible. There's things that they participated in, that were probably shouldn't have. There's lots of things that, like, would indigenous people who would have preferred not to scalp and have to kill white people in the wars that were fought and the battles that were fought? Of course they would. But it's like who started the violence, right? The African people were defending them. Were the Africans in Europe enslaving white people, right? That's the reason why people are saying you should boycott Woman King, because the Woman Kingdom did a bad, they did bad things. Did the Africans come to Europe and make trillions and trillions of dollars and build palaces and enslave white people? Did the Native Americans, right, go to Europe and scalp the heads of British people and build native towns on London Bridge? Did the Native Americans come to France and Germany and enslave the French and the Germans, kill them all, right? Collect for German scalps? Did the Africans go to Austria and to Sweden, right, and chop them up into little pieces, right? Did the Vietnamese come to the France, right, and carpet bomb them to death? And put them in shackles, right? And the Vietnamese make trillions of dollars in France enslaving white French people. Is that what happened? No, right? It's like literally, if people are not completely wrapped up in the most horrific, evil, cultures on this planet and their civilizations, narratives, that would be obvious to people, right? But that's not obvious, because of racism, Euro-Centrism. It's racism that comes out of the colonial capitalist slaving system of mass profiteering disproportionately for a handful of people at the top, but it does benefit white people and Europeans in total, who are often complicit with its class collaboration, its white capital and white working class collaboration. It's colonizer collaboration, right? Well, at least we'll be the ones who knock, right? Both the rulers and also our citizens who go and do. But the deal is, you have to go as a citizen, be a slave catcher as an Irish American, right? The Irish have a different experience in Ireland, but the Irish Americans were slave catchers. They were native people scalpers. You can have a class collab. You might not be a royal, right, in South Africa, but if you are a Dutch common person, it was better than being an African person, because then you can kill. And America is just America is the place of the greatest evil, because America is the place of the greatest mass Euro class collaboration of the Europeans who were not doing very well in Europe flooded 330 million people, hundreds of millions of people into Turtle Island. And that's a major fact that has to be acknowledged. You can't really deal with that fact. You can't really deal with the history of the world. You can't really understand anything about the United States if you don't understand that and what the continued impact of that is. Anyway, so that's why The Women King is an important movie, because it takes the perspective of the people outside. Actually, takes the perspective of the people outside of Europe and the descendants of Europe. Which is like, that's not really a story. Black Panther alludes to it, but doesn't really tell any of those stories. There isn't really any stories that's told. I would say even a lot of stories set in Africa, set in Asia. Apocalypse Now is from the perspective of American soldiers. Full Metal Jacket is not the Vietnamese perspective. It's just from the perspective of American soldiers. Not to say there's nothing that's been made. Obviously, I made games like Decolonators, right? That's about it is a game and a story told from the perspective of the Vietnamese in Vietnam, of the American invasion to bomb Vietnam into the Stone Age, commit mass genocide, recolonize Vietnam for trillions of dollars of over the time profit, and the Vietnamese fighting back to stop it. Also centering women warriors, indigenous Vietnamese woman Luna Oi was the main researcher and the main voice actor for this game. Um, and so some of these things exist, but they're nothing that exists at the scale of a blockbuster front page of the New York Times and CNN Hollywood movie that is actually telling these stories, which is like, and I mean, I'm not saying like I'm proud of the Colonators. I'm sure there's lots of other great movies and shows and games that are of a smaller scale that are being made, but it's very important, that it's important that there exists media. And again, I'm not going to stand everything that comes out of Hollywood, obviously, or giant, huge productions. But if you're going to make a giant, huge production, I'd rather it be the Woman King that centers a non-colonizer perspective than just another run-of-the-mill Marvel America's the best thing since sliced bread, and glossing over all of, and more imperial propaganda, more colonizer propaganda. So anyways, so that's why, and when millions and millions of people see it, it has a bigger impact than in total in the minds of the people, right? Which is where the real battle is fought ultimately. Than in one actual product than any smaller entertainment product will have. Anyways, so and this, when I said Woman King is about queens we're celebrating, I am taking a direct jab at Her Recently Deceased Majesty, because she did participate in the process of colonization, which you might know about if you looked at non-Western Twitter or social media and what the rest of the world is doing, which relates to a lot of things happening. But anyways, I just wanted to front load that, and then there was a review. Maybe I'll go into a little bit of the Woman King review I was just reading. Viola Davis is a strong leads a strong cast into battle in an epic from Gina Prince Bythewood, inspired by real women warriors. Kinetic action adventure, The Woman King is a sweeping entertainment, but it's also a story of unwavering resistance in front and behind the camera. The ascendancy of women filmmakers over the past decade is one of the great chapters in movie history, as women have fought their way back into the field. I mean, also just as women, there's just the women level that I've been talking a lot about that with the recent videos about She-Hulk, about what did I made? I made several videos on this topic. She-Hulk, Prey, right? She-Hulk and I made 2 She-Hulk videos. She-Hulk and Angry Man Babies. The She-Hulk Turk that destroyed crying man children's feelings, as well as Prey, which centers an indigenous woman fighting predators, and so this is like there's a lot of these coming out, and there's a show what is that? Don't Worry Darling. Crap, it's the one with Olivia Wilde and the guy who plays the protagonist in Star Trek. Anyways, Chris Pine. I don't know, I'm forgetting all these names right now. Anyways, doesn't matter. So The Woman King is in a series of shows centering women characters, and this time it's African women. The ascendancy of women filmmakers over the past decade is one of the Olivia Wilde is one of them also. The canvases are again as expansive as their desires. Certainly one of the most expansive of these canvases is The Woman King, a drama about the real women soldiers of the pre-colonial kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa, directed by Gina Prince. By the way, the movie is filled with palace intrigues, sumptuous ceremonies, stirring battles, features a golden age Hollywood like to brag about, a cast of thousands or thereabouts. While it evokes the old-fashioned spectacles the studios habitually turned out long before Marvel, there is no precedent for this one. So that was weird. There is no precedent for this movie. The story, as movie makers also like to say, is inspired by real events, in which, in this case, are mind-blowing. The tale is rooted in the women warriors of Dahomey, whose exact origins remain obscured by tribal myths and oral traditions, as well as the obviously biased, self-serving, and at times contradictory accounts of European observers, obviously. Again, it's like the Europeans, when they have accounts of Africa, right? It's there's a saying, right? The winners write the history, right? The winners write the history. Now, again, that's a Eurocentric perspective in the sense that assumes that the world consists of winners and losers, not of different peoples and nations doing win-win cooperation, right? Do you see how there's a difference there? Somebody has to make up lies, right, and omit the scalpings that we did, and just say, "Oh, Indians were savage and they deserve to be colonized," right? Do you see that there's already Eurocentrism in the this kind of this overview, this paradigm, this the zeitgeist. It's really a multi-thousand year, as I often bring up, worldview, which is that there are winners, right, and there are losers, right? And the winners, whether those are your capitalist boss taking 90% of your labor value and sticking it in his Rolls Royce, whether the win in inside of countries, if the winners are the Greeks who defeated the Persians, right, and the winners are the Europeans who killed and defeated and conquested the Native Americans, right? The winners are the Protestants who defeated the Catholics in this part of Britain in this time, or the Catholics who defeated the Protestants in France in this period. But there has to be a winner and a loser, and the winner enslaves, profits from, abuses, and lies about the loser for the rest of time, unless the loser can somehow come out from under the winners using some confluence of probably hurting and enslaving and taking advantage of other people, and then beat the winner, and then the new winner writes the new history. But you see what this is a really messed up. But it's not necessarily the way of the world, right? The indigenous people of Turtle Island cooperated with each other, hundreds of different nations, right? But unlike the French and the British, right, or the Europeans and the Africans, the indigenous people didn't enslave each other inside of Turtle Island. They didn't win each other, right, and then lie about each other. They had relationships for thousands of years. Not always perfect relationships, but they never sought. Well, this is going to be the Anishinaabe Empire for the next 200 years. And then now it's going to be the Sioux Empire, where the Sioux scalp and kill and crush and enslave the Anishinaabe, or the Sioux scalp and crush and enslave the Blackfoot and the Potawatomi. And the entire continent is just all Anishinaabe. Okay, and now the next 200 years, it gets to be the Blackfoot Empire, and all of the, Anishinaabe and all of the Haida and all of the Algonquin get to be slaves now. Do you see that's a different? You see the difference there. Similar for the Silk Roads in Asia, right? Again, there's no perfect civilization, but the amount of war, the amount of exploitation, the amount of suffering, the amount of slavery, the amount of violence, and the amount of lying about other people, right? And crafting of narrative about other people by the winners is you don't have that, because everyone is winning. Why would the Anishinaabe and the Potawatomi have to make up stories about each other? If they make up stories about each other, when they meet each other to trade in win-win cooperation, like in a multipolar, non-capitalist, non-imperialist world that's coming, if you are Anishinaabe and you write the Sioux, if you're Anishinaabe and you write the Potawatomi, they are so deceitful. They are so treacherous, right? They are such. I'm gonna take this off the screen since I'm just kind of going off right now. The Anishinaabe are so treacherous. They're so deceitful. They're so lying that they're basically devils. They're savage, those people. And then you, the Potawatomi, or you have to come and meet your neighbors to trade, and everyone is like, "Oh, look, it's those nasty people, those Anishinaabe. They're all gonna come scout me. They're going to try to enslave me." Then the Anishinaabe are not going to want to trade with you, right, in win-win cooperation, because you're racist. You're bigoted against them. Do you see how that works? This is actually, I would argue, it is one of a panoply of a diversity of data points when you have cultures who either demonize. I have a whole series on demonization and Stranger Things, and movies like shows like Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Cultures that are filled with demonization of other different cultures tend to be the ones that are win-lose, colonial, imperial. Cultures that, generally have just like, peaceful, just like normal. Oh, that's our cousins. Those are our relatives. Those are our relatives. If they discuss other peoples that are different in language and in dress and in style and in different nation as relatives, as opposed to demons or savages, then the people who describe the different cultures as relatives are win-win cooperative, tend to be win-win cooperative, non-imperial, non-colonial, abusive, extractive, broken people, because, just think about it, right? That's how do you maintain successful win-win peaceful cooperation? Is by speaking truthfully about other people, right? Not necessarily you just worship them, right? But you're not going to want to make up lies about them, right? Because then when your people come to interact with them, the people that you're meeting are going to be like, I don't want to do business with these people. I don't want to trade with these people, because they think they're saying all these defaming, inaccurate, wrong things about me, and they're very mean, right? But now the cultures, right, like Rome, right, like Greece, like Britain, Rome, Greece, 2,000 years ago, Britain, France, for the last 500 years, Japan in a lot of ways, in Asia for some centuries, those places, right? The United States today, obviously, those places, right? The United States lying about Africa, Asia, getting all of its MAGA Republicans to get everyone to not watch Woman King. Those places that propagate disinformation, lies, and demonization, and saying those people are savage. Black on black crime. Not just black on black crime in the disproportionately African American cities like Los Angeles and Oakland or Baltimore, and also black on black crime in Africa, right? Today, all Africans are just all enslaving each other, just like there's conflict in Congo because black people are savage, right? And historically, Africans sold their own people into slavery and they killed each other all the time, and that's why we had to colonize them. So the people, right? That's why Hollywood is disproportionately lying or just omitting, right, the facts about Africa. They're omitting the facts about violence against Native Americans and just going, natives were just savages and John Wayne had to shoot them all and scalp them first because they were trying to scalp us first, right? Again, that's a lie already. So why do you do that? You only make up lies and demonize other and inferiorize and subhumanize people, like black people are lesser people, right? There's an entire most of academia for centuries has been wrapped up in the eugenics and race realism or racism as and social Darwinism, et cetera, race so-called science, right, which is lying through the university system, right, for to disproportionately benefit the Europeans and even more so the richest of the Europeans, which is important. That has to be pointed out because there's that's part of the MAGA communism is when people have ahistorical, non-dialectical, illusory history or non-history, right? And then they're like, well, there's no such thing as the working class was always white. It's like, no, I think I was watching Ben Norton, Danny Haiphong today, and they're like, the working class is not any one race. The working class are all people, right? The assumption that the working class is white people is already embedded within it the racism and the colonial Eurocentric mentality, right? The working class, and it's like, it's got to be a white trucker, right? Is literally Nazi, fascist, right-wing a vehicle to get trucker convoys full of Confederate flags and Nazis to be beloved by people. Go, oh, that's the working class, is when white people work. Right, Gerald Horn, black historian, was on Left Lens the other day, going, I can't even talk about black slavery in the United States because even white leftists in the United States can't handle that. They get upset. They call me uncivil. They leave the conversation. And he's like, I trying to talk to other professors, other so-called leftists of different tendencies. I have to call them, I'm sorry, they're not black slaves. They were unpaid workers, right? Because when you say unpaid workers, then the racists can visualize in their head a white truck driver, kind of looks like Hugh Jackman from Wolverine, with his logging pants on, not getting paid, right? But we can't
because but again, that's the Eurocentric storytelling, which is that the only workers who ever been oppressed, and the capitalism is when white working class, generally men, because that's another one, right? Nurses, Netflix workers, programmers, academics, and teachers, and service industry laborers like the Starbucks employees don't count as working class. Why? Because women and people of color and gay people don't count as working class, right? But again, you see that that's the racism baked into that. So there's always been there are workers, white working, but they're still above other non-white and non-male workers. So there's always been a white, and especially white men, working people collaboration with the white capital, or colonizer collaboration, for mutual benefit, right? That's social democracy in Europe. That's the United States, generally speaking. That's the entire history, and that is, and so that stuff is, that all has to be, brought into focus if you want a clear picture of reality and history, and particularly if you want to make any positive change. Now, the thing is, MAGA communism is a bunch of grifter white dudes like Jackson Hinkle, like Vosh. Vosh is like the Democrat MAGA communism. It's like vote Democrat and let me grift as much as possible. But then the opposite, it's like it's the Jackson Hinkles working with Tucker Carlson. It's the Peter Coffins, the Caleb Maupins, and all these people who don't have any class analysis, don't really care, haven't really read and don't care about Marxism, certainly. They're just making a lot of money with their personal channels, selling a Donald Trump slogan, and people who have read like half of the intro of Das Kapital and then wanted some healthcare, and getting all those people to throw money, because there's a lot of money. Like Donald Trump's voters were white, middle to upper middle class people. That's his voter. They weren't the white working class like everybody keeps talking about. It was the Capitol rioters, which were business owners in Arkansas, dentists, white dentists in Michigan, the upper class lawyers from Florida, right? Suburbanites from Michigan and California, which is full of white Republican red areas. It's just like the cities are like archipelagos of very densely populated blue. But anyway, my point is that all of that is part of the Eurocentric storytelling. That's Eurocentric storytelling inside of the United States, right? The Eurocentric storytelling inside of the United States, even the United States is left, right? MAGA communism, which is right. It just leaves all of these facts out, and then it constructs a narrative that benefits people of European descent or people that buy into the concept of the United States, et cetera, or people who can sell themselves off as white. Anyways, but back to Woman King. The story, as movie makers like to go, is inspired by real events, which in this case is my mind blowing. The tale is rooted in the women warriors of Dahomey, whose exact origin remains obscured by tribal myths and oral traditions, as obviously biased, self-serving. Yeah, so that's a very important point, though. It's like so making biased and self-serving accounts of history is a artifact. It is the toxic informational waste of unhealed colonial ways of being. It's the Wendigo feces in your history book is mass. Why do there have to be contradictory, self-serving, biased stories about Africa? Oh, they're all just savage. They're just dark. They're just degenerates, right? Their genes have eroded over time, and now they're fallen gorillas, and we have to just take all of Africa over because Europeans it's manifest destiny. It's the fate of. It's the inevitable churning of evolution. Again, using so-called science, biology, evolutionary science, Charles Darwin, right? Using the so-called scientific method that's not so scientific a lot of the time, because this all passes science, by the way, in the upper annals of Oxford, Cambridge, and scientific. Ask any today. Anthropologists are still on this extremely racist stuff, holding on to the bodies of indigenous people, making up still to this day just so stories, right? The just so stories of people like Richard Dawkins are the descendants of just so stories written by British biologists, British sociologists and anthropologists about the evolution of life, in which Africa is a cesspool and Europe is the shining pinnacle of human evolution, right? You can't really separate Western science. So I gotta put that in always in quotes, because that is even within the scientific community, like the fiction and nonfiction and history book literature community, or the books generally in the West, since Gutenberg's printing press, which was stolen paper from China, also I might add. The all of that is storytelling, right? Look at the not just the phrenology. That's the easy one. That's like the Republican one. It's just the entire scientific community is filled with this racism. I mean, there are indigenous people have been in Turtle Island for hundreds of thousands of years. Hundreds of archaeologists and anthropologists dig sites from California, East Coast, West Coast, Center, Midwest, everywhere in Turtle Island. Find ancient sites. You can blow up a mountain to build a highway or a railroad somewhere in Kansas, or in even in Canada, anywhere in North America, and they are coming across, archaeologists accidentally coming across 50, 60, 70,000 year old human remains next to obviously cracked bones of megafauna, to get the marrows out that were unbreakable except by intentional smashing with boulders, and like evidence of settlements that go well beyond the 10,000 to 20,000 year land bridge between the North American continent and Asia, right? With that whole concept of, well, indigenous people walked over about 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, etc. Within the last 20,000 years. And all those archaeologists were shut down. Why? Because the scientific community is in the West is not apolitical. It is not self-serving. It is contradictory, and it is biased to benefit the United States racist, capitalist, settler colonial project. Right? To this day, to this second, in fact, just in the 2022, there are a handful of indigenous scholars who are trying to, and they like, the thing is, there are white archaeologists, dozens of them, who have had their careers ruined for having the audacity or just the honesty to publish their findings about 100,000-year-old indigenous settlements. It'd be like if somebody was insisting, I don't know, imagine the Queen of England or the President of the United States and the military and the government and the corporations of the United States, and everyone and everywhere it was putting on blast that the sky is yellow. The sky is yellow, right? And everywhere you walk, like imagine like just walking down the streets of Britain, and instead of posters of your dead plutocratic, capitalist, monarch, feudalist, war criminal, right? The Queen of England. Instead of pictures of the Queen Elizabeth, you had words that said the sky is yellow, the sky is yellow, the sky is yellow, the sky is yellow, because that's all you're seeing nowadays, right? The sky is yellow, the sky is yellow. And if you don't believe the sky is yellow, you're going to jail. Just like people who, if you didn't like the Queen, if you publicly were upset that the Queen covered up for pedophiles like her other royal family members, you can go to jail, right? If you don't say the sky is yellow and you look up and you see the sky is blue, right? It's like the emperor's new clothes. If you don't say the sky is yellow, you're going to jail. But it's the same thing for indigenous people across the world. If you don't say indigenous people have only been here for 10 to 15, 20,000 years at most, you would lose your entire career. And that's in universities. That's the archaeological, anthropological community. You would lose your tenure. You would lose your job. You would not work again. You would be ridiculed out of academia. On the peer review process is the racist, biased, self-serving colonizer process. That's what the peer review process is in science. I'm gonna put that in real scare quotes. Like, I'm not saying there's no science ever done, but I'm like, when people do science, particularly in anything that could impact capitalism, colonialism, racism, and the United States and all of its white working class and white capital class collaborators. If there's anything that could, and the academia as white academic collaborators with white capitalism under settler colonial America. If peer review process is a process of dogpiling and laughing out with it's so-called science, but it's not. It's just like selectively and it's a little more advanced because you have to like use lots and lots of footnotes. But if you just get enough footnotes and you go to enough conferences and you just shout down with your so-called rational thinking in academia, if you just like shout down, indigenous, what is that? Archaeologist trying to find that indigenous. If you take, Robin Wall Kimmerer, right, in Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer made a point that actually indigenous people increased the total ecological footprint, increased the total ecological diversity and people, humans, right? The Homo sapiens that existed before colonization in Braiding Sweetgrass increased the total output and the total biodiversity and the total greenery and health of the ecosystems, right? Because there are arguments in all the sciences. Robin details this in the book, right? Biologists, historians, archaeologists, anthropologists were like, human bad, right? What are you getting out of Bloomberg, CNN, and all of the environmental, even Extinction Rebellion, a lot of these people. Human bad. Homo sapiens are a net destructive element on this planet Earth. They destroy ecosystems, right? You are a virus, like Agent Smith from The Matrix said, and the cure is sentient AI that will kill all of the masses of the people and give all the power to a handful of billionaires who also become techno kings. No. The humans are bad, and some people are literally, humans should go extinct because that will save the rest of the species of the planet Earth, the plants and the animals and the insects, etc. Right? But Robert Wall Kimmerer was like, no, actually, indigenous people are necessary and coexist not only with other nations of humans, but they coexist. There are certain plants that if the humans aren't gathering these wild rice and these corn and these other berries, those species will lose over time because humans are so interconnected and woven into the ecosystems that the humans are necessary, and other species will actually go extinct because the humans are no longer around, right? But again, right? So even in Willie Gibson's books, like many other Western written books, the Anthropocene, the era of the human extinction, it should really be called the Westocene or the Euro-Scene, where Europeans caused mass extinctions of indigenous people and these other planet animal species on Turtle Island. Because indigenous people were actually vital to the survivability of the native species. Do you see this though? When you say it's the Anthropocene, you're saying that the crimes of Europe are all humans are guilty of them. And so you all should go away. And when we say you all should go away, what the Europeans and the white working class and white capital collaborators mean is all of you poor people who are too stupid. That's like you are too stupid. For like pets or kettle, you are incapable of self-governing and managing your own affairs. Very smart London singularitarian, very, very, very big genius brain, like Galaxy S10, Elon Musk grade genius brain, long-termists like Nick Land, the famous accelerationists, like the new Silicon Valley, and philosophers from a dusty old waste bin called Oxford, who are like the heads of these eugenics projects called the long-termism. They keep rebranding, like Patriot Socialism is now proletarian working class ism or whatever the hell it is. And the solution is all of you have to go away so that smart, white, feudal, and capitalist hereditary beneficiaries of colonialism who go to Oxbridge and Stanford and Yale can take over for you, all you stupid people in Africa. Literally, these are arguments they've made. Africans, money would be better spent not alleviating poverty in Africa. Give all your money to the richest CEOs on Wall Street. Give all of your wealth. Like, instead of donating $5 in your Starbucks coffee and take 50 cents and throw it into Ugandan starving child's emaciated belly. Don't help the African child. Don't help the Asian child. Don't help Latin America. Don't help the indigenous people. Give all your money These are the accelerationist argument. Give all of your money that you could, take everything you would donate to charities. Don't give it to Source Book Games. Give it to Elon Musk, because he's a genius, and his mind is worth more. He will save more humans and 56, 10 to the 56th power future simulated humans in a Dyson sphere of artificially intelligent run, multi-quintillion exillions of human lifespans. They'll have happy lives if we give all of our money and power to the richest, whitest, feudal, capitalist, colonialist beneficiaries, like Elon, like the Queen of England, like the top brass at London, like the Silicon, like the entrepreneur, like the CEO, like the tech magnate executives. Just give all your money to the richest people and the most privileged people on the earth, and that will save the earth. Because all the African and Asian and indigenous and South Central Americans, they're too stupid. Neofeud is like literally true on earth, unfortunately, because these people do run the earth. They're like the Great Reset. I mean, the people that are all about this Bermuda in the sky with diamonds is you can go look it up if you want to feel sick. Read Douglas Rushkoff's Survival of the Richest. It's just one accounting of a science fiction author getting paid $200,000 for an hour of his time to speak to some of the most powerful multi-billionaires on the planet to decide whether to install artificial intelligent robot guards in its underground fallout bunker for the event nuclear war, zombie apocalypse, fascist takeover of the earth, or just pandemic or climate apocalypse. Anyways, so the point is that like all of that stuff ignores the history of the actual earth, which is the history of people that were coexisting with each other and with nature. Anyway, so my point is that kind of storytelling is the Anthropocene narrative. The humanity is always net destructive narrative and will destroy the environment around it, is false storytelling, and it is Eurocentric storytelling, because it is what they've done, but it is materially not what lots of other peoples of the earth have done in total. Not to say there's never been any. I don't want to say like that Africa, Asia, Pacific, and Turtle Island indigenous peoples had zero problems, but it's just like the net sum of their impact on other people, on the planet, on the environment, and on the quality of life of people generally and all living things is not net negative, right? That is itself, right? The human's bad story is a Eurocentric story. Anyways, so that's why Women King, movies like this are important as well, because they're talking about their actual resistance and the actual fighting of net malicious forces, right? And they don't always fight it perfectly, we as indigenous peoples of the earth, as non-white peoples of the earth, as colonized peoples of the earth, have always had to make difficult choices. Sometimes there were two choices and both of them resulted in your annihilation, right? Gerald Horne was discussing there are dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of indigenous tribes that used to exist in North America. They no longer exist, and he mentioned all their names. There were 6 of the indigenous Hakka people on one island, Thailand alone, who were wiped out by not even Europeans, by the Japanese who collaborated with the Europeans in the colonial era, and still do today as part of the G7. So the struggle is never easy. The actual struggle of colonization is never easy. It's never clean. It's never perfect. There is no purity to it, which is why the metaphysical first world perspective likes the purity, because the purity, Che and Castro, one time they killed some people and they didn't do the revolution. They had some private businesses, and so they're bad, and so we have to support the United States and the State Department backing, throwing billions of dollars to do color revolution in Cuba and undo their socialist successes, because one time they did a revolution bad, or they didn't do it to my level of Marx / Kropotkin or whatever bread daddy, book daddy tested level of angelic purity. You didn't meet the sanctity. One time you might have had a state or a business somewhere, and that's bad, and so now you're all canceled or whatever. So no, because like to obviously, like, again, indigenous people were not scalping before the Europeans started scalping indigenous people in North America, right? And Native people would have liked to not have to fight wars. The Comanche would like to not have had to kill hundreds and thousands of white settlers, stampeding with their unwashed ass and their clumsy ass guns and their incompetent fighting forces, along with Mr. Custer, right? The indigenous people of Turtle Island would like to not have had to have fought the wars against the invading genocidal settler Europeans, right? But to say, because Indians were savage because they killed some Europeans, right, is not fair. In the same way that some black people in Africa, some people benefited from the slave trade. Some people benefited from this African is bad because he made $1 million collaborating with the United States. I mean, that individual, like, that's not good that person did that. What has the United States done to fund and arm and bribe as many people who are willing to sell their own people out as possible in Africa and everywhere else? Because it goes like, and because of that, because this one, it's like, what I'm saying? It's like saying, like, because there was one Wendigo among one sellout amongst this oppressed people, that oppressed people is bad, right? This is like going in Haiti. These 3 black people sided with the colonizers from Europe, and so the Haitian Revolution was bad because look, these 3 people went and made some money in France. It's like, you have your Obama and you have your Obama, the black guy making money and power and career and selling The Audacity of Hope and getting book deals in DC, working for the empire. You have your Marco Rubio. He's from South America. He's from he's Hispanic. You have your Ted Cruz. You have your people who come to America from South Central America, and then they make a lot of money selling out their own peoples down there. Bolsonaro wants to come to America, make a lot of money and career, trying to reinstate fascism in Brazil. Right? He's literally said, "I'm going to America if Lula wins." So there's people that are constantly selling out their people, but to say like, so Brazil is evil now, because one time Bolsonaro came out. So Lula is terrible too, because Lula we what we have to do is we have to, like, the U.S. has to go overthrow Brazil and meddle in its internal affairs. You see what I'm saying? It's like that narrative is that's part of the you have to boycott this woman king because some Africans did a bad thing one time. So Africa bad, and it's just so disingenuous. But anyways, actually, speaking of that, let's go. I want to go through some of these threads because I fucking feel like it. Oh yeah, so this is the one. So I already made a kind of post about this earlier. Europeans. So in the Woman King trailer, let's just watch the Woman King trailer. I think this is gonna be fine.
The Europeans will not stop until Africa is theirs. They are Gojira already. Don't you know together we are strong?
Now we have declared war.
We're gonna fight the madness till it's gone. Some things are worth fighting for. We just gotta rise up. Rise up.
We are the spear of victory. We are the blade of freedom.
The Woman King in theaters September 16th. Rated PG-13.
Yeah, so it just came out. Anyways, so Europeans won't stop until Africa is dead. I mean, this is what already is bringing all the racists to this show and getting them big mad is because it tells the truth. I mean, this is the reality. Europe isn't stopping. Europe is still taking trillions of dollars and impoverishing Africa. I mean, all of France is in so many Western countries still. It's in Uganda. It's in Yemen, doing genocide and massacring children with the U.S. military complicit and blowing up preschools and kindergartens and bombing all the cornfields so people starve. Europeans are Germany is still in Namibia. It's still benefiting from U.S. Imperialism and colonialism. Not all of that. Every single German person is happy with that. But again, the collaboration with the German working class and German capital and American capital is still a net benefit, because the Germans are still the average white German is doing better than the African on average. People in Africa, especially the places that Germany still has neo-colonial plunder. Germany still benefits. 97% of the lithium was going to come out of Bolivia and go straight to white working class Germans. And the German capitalists who run the gigafactory for Elon Musk, a South African apartheid billionaire working with America. Do you see the white solidarity between South Africa, the United States, Germany, working class and capital? They were gonna get the German workers were gonna get $35 to $40 plus, taking Bolivia's lithium and making the batteries. That's working class. I'm building batteries as a white working class member, but the German man was gonna get a good middle class or higher salary at his factory's plant. The Bolivians were getting starvation wages. They were getting like a handful of dollars or less per day in Bolivia to mine the lithium, send it to the German. No, Elon was getting billions. German executives were getting millions. But the white working classes of Germany, not the Muslims, who are suffering horrific racism in Germany to this day, being violently berated out of Starbucks for being Muslim. Why? How dare you be Muslim in my German Starbucks in Berlin, right? Oh, we're so progressive. No, you're not. I was reading this thread. I'm going to bring that up in a second. Germany's getting more racist. They have goose-stepping Nazis marching up and down Germany, and neither Merkel nor the current government do anything about it because they're all complicit with the United States. They're all not Nazi Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. They're all up inside that, The Europeans won't stop until Africa is dead is the statement that is pissing off all the people who would have otherwise probably not paid attention. One of them, right? Which is the truth. Native women warriors, anyways, so I have a whole thread about the Native women warriors across the world, but so this is part of this thing that's happening right now, and I decided, since it seems like the YouTube audiences are all watching more of this stuff every time I tweet about these things. This is the other thing I want to bring up, especially since the Queen died, but even before that, people across the planet. We're in the Anglosphere, which is the white world, right, along with the Francosphere and the Spanish-speaking universe. And every time I tweet about, hey, racism exists, I get 30, 40 people unfollow me. It's amazing. So, it's interesting. When George Floyd died and people recognize, oh my goodness, maybe racism is a problem, when 31 million people almost burnt down the entire United States and there was global uprisings for Black lives. That's all gone now. Everyone's like, we have to stand the monarchy and white purity and European world domination, because we're all being persecuted because somebody said that the Queen had pedophile family members. You just say basic true things. The Queen was a multi-hundred millionaire and Charles is a billionaire, and if you say that, you can go to jail. And we have to support the British anarchists are going, we have to support the British monarchy and the British police because white anarchists, because somebody said a mean thing about our Queen. I mean, aren't you fucking anarchists? Anarchist becomes monarchist the second whiteness is challenged. It's like anarchists become monarchists. It's amazing stuff. And so I'm like, but apparently some people on YouTube are more here for it. So I'm going to keep, Queens were celebrating. Somebody brought up in India as well, right? Because I had this whole thread. As action fans attack the Prey movie as unrealistic for having women warriors, consider that women fought on the front lines. So I'm just gonna, since I'm having trouble going through there's a bunch of tweets I wanted to address, but this is one I want to kind of go through. As action fans attack the Prey movie as unrealistic for having women warriors, consider that women fought on the front lines of indigenous non-patriarchal cultures like Hawaii, but the white man's world has fought to erase her history, like our languages. these women. So again, you know, perfect in the light of the Woman King, about indigenous African women warriors fighting against actual oppression, right? In Hawaii, westernization has erased these female leaders such as Kaniloko and the other women who fought on the front line of battles in defense of sovereign Hawaii. Women in Hawaii were consistently in what the West considered male professions and has attempted to systematically erase and bury this fact. Also, in Hawaii, the narrative about Hawaii was that the Hawaiians were savages. Kamehameha was a massacring, bloodthirsty, brutal. They stopped just short of saying gorilla, right? But they want this, and the right Republican right wingers will just say the Hawaiians were monkeys, just like Africa, and they were all bloodthirsty, murdering natives, throwing spears at civilized white people and each other. And then Europe came and civilized white. Now the reality is actually the battle that Kamehameha fought. This was they fought at the Pali, and some Hawaiians who actually are they're like they have drunken the white grape Kool-Aid, white grape flavored Kool-Aid installed by the colonial textbooks, history books, and education system. Unfortunately, which is that. I saw a Hawaiian recently say, well, Hawaiians we were killing and slaughtering each other all the time. Why are you saying that? The actuality of this battle is that not that many people were killed, not even close to anything like most battles involving Europeans. Most people willingly surrendered because they understood that this is one of the battles that were fought to unite Hawaii against the incoming big evil that was the Europeans, because the Hawaiians had read about the hundreds of native, not white tribes that had gone extinct in North America when Europeans showed up. The Hawaiians had read about the mountains of bodies that the Europeans left in Africa, the extinct tribes in Africa, the enslaved peoples of Africa. The Hawaiians had read about, and Hawaiians had known that what was coming because they had advisors that were telling them, this is what's coming. Like Hawaiians brought in Europeans so that they could know. I mean, it's not ideal. Some people go, well, Kamehameha, he had John Young, and he brought Europeans in, and that was the beginning of the downfall because you brought in again you brought European thinking and mentality into the great Hawaiian people, and that's also wrong think, right? How again, it's like if you want to know, right? If you want to actually understand your enemy and not allow your enemy to crush and destroy you, you have to understand them. Where are you going to get the understanding from? Imagining it in your belly button, Lynn? Or are you going to actually get people who are defecting from their European colonial society? Because this is the thing. The Europeans have always had people who were naysayers of colonization and slavery. Jonathan Swift, even in going back to Ireland, right, which has a longer history than the European colonization of Africa. Jonathan Swift was already the father of the modern satire, right? At least in Britain, wrote The Modest Proposal, which is a cookbook of recipes to saute, deep fry, and boil, mostly boil because there's no culinary competency at all in Britain. But anyways, to cook it's a cookbook for Irish to cook their own children to try to get some kind of empathy, some kind of basic human empathy from the British who were, again, doing what? Lying and demonizing, right? A different people, the Irish people. Why? So that they could control, exploit, benefit from their land, their labor, and their bodies, and starve them in the famine, right? Again, so that's a good, because people know about something about the history of Britain and Ireland, right? You have the Peaky Blinders stars coming out with Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, and an interviewer goes, "You're British, right?" No, I'm Irish. And he's like, "Oh, that's basically British." And he's like, "No, I'm Irish." It's like within the United Kingdom, within that little western edge, western wet rocks off the edge of France, there has been differences where certain people have, again, like I said earlier, right? Like in the same way that the Europeans made up lies about native people of America, Africans, and Asians. Right? Asians all spread Wuhan flu. Africans are all backward savage monkeys, and the Turtle Island people are all scalping, murderous, barbarous Indians. Inside of the UK, they were making up lies about the Irish, and at the same time as crushing and dominating and exploiting them. So again, that's the same. That the win-lose ways within Europe were already there, and then they expanded these mass violence, mass plunder, and mass disinformation. Right? That's just a way of existing that predated colonization. When the Europeans had the capacity to venture out and explore a lot of the wider world in the 17, 18, 19th centuries, then they took their ways that they were practicing in Europe. The oppression of Jews in Europe was another one, long historical example. Then they expanded that to the entire planet. But they were already doing that to the Irish. The race science was already invented. This racist eugenicist way was already there in Britain. Who said that they actually wrote in their British science books, in their British biology books, they wrote you can see the theories, you can see the pedigree and the differences of race of the Cockney. The Cockney and the other like lower class peoples of Britain, they are different species. They actually said they're a different, entirely different race and sometimes species of people, these Cockney, for they are genetically incapable of correctly pronouncing the high, very, very sophisticated British words. When they talk like this, and they, oh mate, you got a water bowl. I got a water bowl next to my poverty family. And the British actually, this was their science, right? Before colonization, they already wrote these things. The Windsor Palace, the aristocracy, the lords and the ladies are great descendants of this advanced race. And there's another species of people, the low people of London, the people who clean and cook and wash all of our dishes and polish all of our $400 million diamonds. Those people are a separate race of people. They are called this, and they are called the people who nick the push iron in the 10-foot. They are the northern fallen degenerate people, and we should not associate with them. We should not interbreed with them, because like a prized poodle intermingling with a common mutt, we could degenerate the purity of our Anglo-Saxon pinnacle of genes. They already had that before Darwin, actually. If you look, Darwin was really just elaborating and getting a career, being trumpeted and then published because it benefited the upper class. When it's not really, it's a way of thinking and existing inside of, not even within the same city. Like people on the high street, you have people in like $100 million, a $10 million flat. And on the bottom of that high rise, you'll have people like that live on less than $5, $10 a day, right? Like Deliverooing all of your fucking cheeky Nandos and moving all of your tasty food around in the same building. You have two different races of people as defined by Anglos, basically with Europeanism, right? But then you take what's in one building. In one palace, you have the queen, and in the same palace, you have the lower. And you do not make children. That's why there were so many orphans. Because to have an intermingling of a crowned, gold-studded British prince, queen, king, marquise, marquess, Dutch, duke, duchess, right, lord, this viscount, with a peasant servant, there were two different races. And so that intermingling was a degeneracy and reduction of the greatness, the sophistication. I want to say that pre-existed before colonialism, and then in colonialism it just accelerated since. Now you see the differences between the blood of the royal queen. Now the thing is, It was actually self-destructive because with cousins marrying cousins, sisters and brothers fucking each other, like the Targaryens, and then you have the Mad Kings, and in the real world you have lots of inbred royalty getting horse faces and losing their minds and becoming more actually degenerating themselves, as opposed to heightening the sanctity of the great British royal divinely mandated feudal dynasties, as opposed to elevating. You actually were destroying themselves and their bodies physically, but they were so. But again, it did benefit the masses. It did benefit the minority of those people who ruled, to the losses and the violence and the disinformation and the lying to the masses around them, right? So, even to their own detriment, right? Boiled potatoes and boiled meat and boiled, white bread with watercress in the middle as a sandwich is what the British ate, and they called that a delicacy. This is disgusting. This is like, as I said before, this is like culinary condensed pain and sadness. This is like Les Miserables is a story about being forced to consume British cuisine. It's a story. It's not. It's like, but they chose to have bland and boring food to maintain their economic and political and social power above everyone else, because it was a way of separating the masses who had access to spices and different styles of cooking from the aristocracies, right? And we could say, well, we don't use all those spices. We have. Now, they didn't call it bland and boring food, right? But that's part of why all the food. When you go on black and non-white Twitter and social media, Instagram and TikTok, it's all like people of color like cringing at, oh my God, what are you doing to this food? Why do you have like a pound of salt going into white bread, cooked inside of deep fried grease and air fried fucking Mars bars? What the hell are you doing? I mean, not to say you shouldn't fry a Mars bar, but it's just like you have like very strange and kind of not very good tasting cooking going on here. Sad, cold Brussels sprouts with dry turkey, and that's like amazing. Anyways, so but my point is that I went way off, but all of that those lies continue to pile up, and one of those lies is that the Hawaiians were super violent. The reality is the Hawaiians didn't have no necessarily violence, but again, it's like, if you look at the life expectancies that were by Captain Cook, colonizer Cook's own words, 80 to 100 years on average, you don't get commoners living 80 to 100 years. You don't get masses of people doing that well. You don't have you don't have such successes in coexistence with nature without, not to say there's zero violence and zero fighting ever, but that was not the mass norm. Now in Europe, you did have tiny, short little life expectancies because everyone was starving to death, being killed, fighting each other, slaughtering each other, dying for one or another king's wars all the time. In fact, that's why they got good at killing each other, and then they took all of the Europeans and they went around the world and killed everyone, right? So the point is that like there were people who fought and did know how to fight. Number one, in indigenous countries that were actually fighting on the right side of history, they had women fighting with the men. There was not this patriarchal men's only world, right? And so that was what Hawaii had. Number two, the fights were, before I got off topic, the fights were not at the same level of violence, and they were not the same level of barbarity as the European fights. Again, so coming back to Hawaii, when Kamehameha united the islands, most of the other alii, the leaders, went along willingly because they understood we have to unite against these violent people coming from Europe. Right? Look at what this is what they're doing. Listen to the tale of John Young. Listen to the tale of this white sailor. They will tell you, this is what I saw in Britain, or this is what I saw in Africa. Hey, I am a French writer, and I visited America, and I saw the endless miles of chopped forest and the piles of the dead bodies. I saw scalps piled to the height of buildings of dead Native American people. This is what Europeans do. I'm a European. I mean, my point was with Jonathan Swift was like there were defectors, right? There were people who They were a minority of radical leftists, right? They were radical is just to even, in a satire, slightly point out how barbarous the Europeans actually were, right? And going like, maybe we shouldn't starve the Irish to death, right? And then, but the important thing is not that Jonathan Swift wrote the modest proposal, right? The important thing is that the Europeans did not listen and they did not follow. Either, when Jonathan Swift, the modest proposal for, it's about the Irish starvation, and it's a satire going, look at how terrible we, the British, are treating the Irish, right? What we should do, that's what it was. A modest proposal for preventing children of poor people from being the burden to their parents or the country, and for making them beneficial to the public. Jonathan Swift, right? In Dublin. And so it's about like, hey, and basically it's cook and eat your own children, right? The British killed many people with famine. In India, more people were killed. Basically, the British tested famine and they killed hundreds of thousands of Irish. And then the British went, again, that's a good example. Then they went, when the British, they had already done it to the Irish. And then when they went to India, they said, well, let's kill 27 million. And Winston Churchill said, literally, it's India's fault for breeding like rabbits and being bad farmers. Not we, because we're actually taking their resources, leaving them with nothing, and causing their famines. So the British had already done it to the. And you see where I'm saying the colonial is the ways of Europe replicating themselves across the planet. And so but the point is that the important point is that you read this book in school, but what you don't take away from that is the British did not listen to, or they were too scared, because they knew that the feudal, capitalist, ruthless powers of Britain, the oligarchs, the aristocrats in Windsor's palace, in London, the people who ruled Britain, and all of their collaborator lords and ladies and temporarily embarrassed future princes and what if I marry a British royal family member? That's important. Fairy tales and Disney movies of princes and princesses are very important. That's why I made Neofeud, because they reinforce. Before there were temporary embarrassed millionaires in America, right, who were like, I'm gonna stand capitalism. I don't want capitalism and billionaires to go away, because what if I become Jeff Bezos one day? I could, but in Britain and in Europe there was always, I could, maybe, I'm a British working class person, starving peasant, but I could maybe one day, like, I don't know, Snow White, like, I don't know, Cinderella, I could go from rags to riches by marrying a prince. Do you see how the commoners can it can prevent revolution and undoing of unjust systems by dangling the carrot that maybe you could win the Squid Games of feudalism, right? Maybe you'll be the one out of 400 people to not suffer nasty British short life, and you win the prize, right? So Americans are just replicating the European system, but with thrones of $100 bills instead of gold and diamond and blood dynasty. Although the Americans still have blood dynasty, they just don't talk about it. You're more likely, the probability of you increasing your economic and social standing above your parents depends more upon your blood and who your parents are than how hard you work in America. So America is already, again, it's feudalist and capitalist. I like to make that point because it's important. And so the British didn't listen to this proposal. They threw it out. Either they played dumb and they said, this is a atrocious story. They said boycott Jonathan Swift. It's kind of like boycott the Women King, right? When people called out the brutal treatment of the Irish people by Britain, people said boycott Jonathan Swift, right? It's just like when Women King calls out the brutal treatment by Britain and Europe of Africa, right? All of the they're not royalty, they're just middle to upper middle class white people who benefit from white supremacy and colonialism, and they say boycott Woman King, just like they said boycott Jonathan Swift. They either said boycott Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift is a satirist. It's a badly written story. It's not logical. It's kind of like Prey is impossible and unlikely and bad writing because a 5-foot indigenous woman who doesn't have 40-inch biceps and couldn't throw a Joe Rogan brand shot put more than 2 feet, she couldn't possibly beat a predator you know, which I got off on that one. Predator is a final girl story about a dude being Jamie Lee Curtis with man boobies instead of girl boobies, outwitting the unstoppable horror movie entity like the Terminator or Michael Myers, or in Arnold's case, it was the first Predator in Predator 1, right? And so, you know, but people come at the Woman King going, this is illogical, this is bad because these people were bad. This movie does, I've seen it already. Women can't fight as good as men. This is illogical, bad. Don't watch it. Boycott it. Just don't watch this movie. But this is the same thing that the white working class and the white aristocracy said about Jonathan Swift. What the British working class and the British aristocracy said about Jonathan Swift when he released his Modest Proposal, which was dunking on it was a satirical, biting, barbed rip into the British treatment of the Irish. Well, if you're gonna starve the Irish, why don't you give them a cookbook about how to cook their own children, right? So either the majority of people played dumb, or they said this is atrocious, or they just said don't read this book, or they said or they read it and they said, oh, Jonathan, you're so right. We the British treat the Irish so terribly, but where will I get the revenue from all of my Irish labor if we treat the Irish well? I understand, Jonathan, but they didn't say the last part. They just said, I understand, Jonathan, but there's nothing to be done. That's the Democratic Party. Oh, I feel so bad for black people, but we're just going to hire another $2 billion worth of police recruiting funds. The joke, Biden announced he's going to spend $2 billion more. He's going to triple the police recruiting budget and then quadruple police budgets, basically. Oh, I'm so sorry that we have a black woman. There's a black woman vice president. Isn't that good enough? I don't know what to do about black people's suffering. Let's just hire more police and throw them all in prison and shoot them like George Floyd some more, right? So there were the Democrats, and then there were the Republicans of Britain, right? And some of them they said, oh, this is terrible. But did the British at the end of the day, did the British actually do anything to alleviate the poverty of the Irish and make them equals? Ask the Irish today what they think about Britain. They'll tell you. They'll say, fuck that queen, because she fucking has participated in our suffering, has backed King Charles is like wearing the outfit that the British used when they came and killed innocent Irish in the last century. He's like literally wearing the outfit that the British would wear when they went to murder Irish people to put down their requests for equality. So the British are still treating the Irish like shit to this day for the last 1,000 years. For the last 1,000 years, the British have been doing this horrible oppression to the Irish and lying about them. And this is how it started. Horrible oppression, anti-Irishness, British oppression, famine, starvation, millions of Irish dead. How it's going? British oppression, starvation, lying about the Irish. Irish still fucked, right? Like 1,000 years, right? Anyways, but I bring that up because then people were like, well, Silver Spook, you just hate white people. No, this is like, the Irish are they're white. They count as white in America, but it's not necessarily just it's not a melanin count thing. It's like a way of, it's a total societal, sociological, psychological, historical, and economic reality and way of existing within the world, perpetuated by a negatively synergistic confluence of all of these events and histories that make Britain who it is, that make Europe who and what it is, and that make and necessitate the storytelling from non-Eurocentric perspectives extremely vital, right? Not because there's something bad about that area. It's just like that is it's just like there are so many quadrillion of words and billions and trillions of dollars that have been spent making movies, books, stories, and individuals talking to each other at water coolers, in palaces, online, offline, in history books, back and forth between Jonathan Swift in 17th century, diatribes, in letters. There's so much lies and disinformation that has been told for the last thousands of years, and especially in the last 500 years, that have been from that Euro and Euro feudal and Euro capitalist and Euro imperialist perspective, that there's really there can never be enough movies like The Woman King. There can never be enough non-Eurocentric, anti-imperial, anti-colonial, anti-white supremacy perspectives. You know what I'm saying? We're like we are literally trillions of we are billions of books and movies and shows and plays and games and nonfiction books behind, in that sense, to undo this narrative. If it took thousands of years, or 500 years at least, and millions and millions of Europeans, professors, teachers, think tanks, and individuals propagating those CIA Wurlitzer jukebox and the MI6 Wurlitzer jukebox of disinformation within each other, around their kitchen tables, around their water coolers, in their academic halls, inside of their cinematic Hollywood production sets, making these bullshit. If that all of that has to be undone with like mountains and mountains. Somebody said, you know what was that? It was like somebody said, you know, white people, you mad about the Black Mermaids? You mad about Black Mermaids? You mad about Woman King? You mad about Black Elves and Black Dwarves? I made a video about that last week. You know, just wait until we flip all this shit, you know? Where's the Black Lord of the Rings? There's a picture with all black cast, Black Lord of the Rings. Where is it? Yeah, it's like, you know, it's like, are you mad that there are Black Elves and Black Dwarves in your white supremacist fantasy called Lord of the Rings, written by a racist? His name's J.R.R. Tolkien. Are you upset about that? Just wait until every single character is black. In fact, like, they should make this. They should. This, again, like I said, there are so many. There are mountains. There are like, there is not enough paper in my printer to print out a list of the names that are black characters that have been played by white actors. You know, from The King and I, from all the blackface of white people playing black slaves. Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man himself, played a black character in the last 20 years in Tropic Thunder. Now that's committed, but still, it's you know, Robert Downey Jr. is a white billionaire philanthropist, arms dealer, playboy, Iron Man, playing Lawrence Fishburne's black Vietnam deployed soldier in Apocalypse Now. I mean, what the fuck was that? What was that? No, that was Ben Stiller making a blackface movie. So how much blackface? That's just a recent one. There's like, you go in the 20th century, there is like mountains and mountains of blackface and brownface and Asian. Mickey Rooney playing a racist Asian caricature, right? So no, the reality is 96% of the world is not looking in, you know, in this world. 96% of the planet does not look like Chris Pine and Donald Trump and Queen Elizabeth or King Charles. They look closer to people like that. They look like in Africa, there are more black people just in Africa, not including the diaspora. In Africa, there are 3 times as many people as there are in the entire white people in the entire North American continent. Actually, it's like 4 times as many people. There's only 250 million white people in the United States. There are more black people in Africa than if you had every white person on the earth by a good amount. So, and that's just one continent. Then you have Asia. Asia is 60% of the human race, and then you have Turtle Island. Then you have the Pacific, right? So, if people are upset that there are black elves and black dwarfs, if you're upset that there are black mermaids, if you're upset that there are movies that are actually telling the truth about Africa with you know, wall-to-wall black casts, you should, you know, we haven't even got started yet. Wait until, if you see any movie, 96% of the people, so 1 out of every 20 people in every movie should be white by that same token. So we're not even close to there, you know? But one day there will be a reality where 1 out of 20 people are white, and then Hollywood's running out of money because they spent all their money throwing it into sanctions in Russia and China. The West is fucking sanctioning Russia right now. People are freezing and starving in the dark as the Nord Stream 1 goes off. How are Germans gonna be racist against the Muslims in Berlin Starbucks when the power to keep the lights on and to unlock the electronic doors from Starbucks is down because German anti-Asian yellow peril racism has caused blowback sanctions to cut off the power to Berlin Starbucks and all of Berlin? How are you going to be racist against non-white people, Germany, when you don't have any power to tweet racist epithets from your German Nazi phone? I'm sorry, your German BMW, your German, which is also Nazi money all over it. Also, Deutsche Bank, Nazi descendants. Germany is just run by fucking Nazis that have good PR campaigns. How are you going to keep being racist to the world and complain about the movies and tell black people to boycott black-produced, John Boyega and Viola Davis produced this movie, black-written, black-produced, black story-centered authentically? How are white people going to be able to yell at people of color to stop watching movies like this? Well, you don't have any electricity to yell anything on. You don't have a car to drive because the parts to make the car were from a factory that in Spain and France that have shut down because of your sanctions, because of your racism and your collaboration with continued colonial power centered in the U.S. hegemon. How are you going, right? But now NATO and the U.S. want to sanction China. Like, you thought Russia was bad. You don't even know what you're dealing with when you think you can isolate China. It's just like, this is like, I mean, I don't know. That's some heavy copium, man. I don't know what people are smoking over there. I feel like if the U.S. and NATO and the Western countries try to sanction China, I feel like Hawaii is gonna, rather than completely be in the dark with no respirators, medical equipment, 90% of the goods, like everything comes, even if you're a green Westerner, the vast majority of all of your sand, the silicon, they go in your chips, your semiconductors, all of this, the green technology that goes into the photovoltaic panels for solar power, renewable energy, it's coming out of fucking China. I think Hawaii's gonna go straight and become independent and side with the multipolar, non-racist, non-Western imperial world. If that happens, I don't know what people are smoking over there. People are losing their shit, man. It's probably like Omicron, Epsilon, BA6 variant of COVID plus monkeypox and with a chaser of tuberculosis and the return polio that is ransacking New York. I think all that together is just breaking the brain on top of all the disinformation. And everybody's like, what's a good idea? Let's sanction the entire world's most important economically central new superpower. Let's just sanction China, right? Let's just blow, like we've already shot part of one of our foot off. Let's shoot our other foot and the rest of our body and whatever remains of our skull that's already full of swastikas and brain worms and hydroxychloroquine. Let's just blow the rest of our brain out and try to sanction China. Like, that's a good idea. Anyway. But anyway, that's a little economic, political update for you. That's a geopolitical Silver Spook update in the middle of what was a rant or a high velocity jet engine decibel volume educational stint. Anyways, so what the Woman King is, I didn't get to this thread. I should probably actually get to it. But Westernization has erased the leaders such as Kanye Loco and women who fought on the front line of battles in defense of sovereign Hawaii, and the West has consistently attempted to bury this fact. So the Woman King also just speaking to the truth about women's indigenous women fighting on the right side of history, because when you fight against colonization and imperial conquest and slavery genocide, that's the right side. That history, and again, the Dahomey people, the Dahomey country where these women were fighting for, that was just one of many, right? And I go through that. I don't even have the beginning. Again, there's so much history. If we were CRT is the beginning. every history book in the United States should be full of African history, Asian history from the perspective of Africans. Not just American history, America's history of the true history of slavery and genocide of indigenous peoples and the racism and that ongoing struggle, but then also the history of Africa and the history of Asia, the history of the Silk Road, the history of the invention of paper and the invention of black powder. That was celebratory fireworks for a long time, and it was made into weapons by Europe. When white slavers took Asian slaves and brought paper and other technologies back to Europe. That history should be in every American textbook, should be in every European textbook. Europe might not be freezing and starving to death along with the United States if Americans and Europeans understood African and Asian and indigenous history. Now, the problem with that is if people learn that would undo the settler colonial, that would undo the neo-feudal and capitalist and racist ruling class oligarchs of the U.S., right? But it would actually be in the long run to the benefit of the masses of people, right? But anyways, so the history of indigenous and native non-white women resisting, and often in military combat, although they don't desire that, but if you have to, then that's a place that you have to go. Resisting colonization has a long history. So in Hawaii, we have the action. In Hawaii, there were Native Hawaiians, women who were on the front lines of these battles. In India, somebody mentioned in this thread to me, in India, during our freedom struggle and British occupation, there were several fearless lady queens who fought against the British. Sadly, guns prevailed over swords, but still the bravery and tactical skills were equal to their male contemporaries. So, when do you hear about that? Not too often, right? Not too often. In Vietnam, 2 indigenous warrior sisters rose up against an oppressive invader, fighting personally against their army. They united 15 plus ethnic minorities in revolution and came to be known as the Viet people. The Vietnam defeated colonizers, and that was 2,000 years ago. And in this case, it was a southern Chinese governor. So again, I'm not saying that there's zero violence ever in the history of all of Asia Pacific and Turtle Island and Africa, but the total amount is minuscule. It's like not even less than 100th in total of what has existed in Europe, certainly over the last 500 years. Anyways, they united 15 plus ethnic minorities, these women, warrior sisters, and political leaders as well, and they defeated colonizers like U.S. and French with women fighters as well. So during the oppressive rule of Su Ding in 40 AD, 2 warrior sisters, Trung Trác and Trung Ni, declared independence for Vietnam. The twins rode elephants into battle and fought personally against Governor Su Ding's army. The revolution of the Trung sisters united 15 plus ethnic minorities in the region, and which came to be known as the Viet people. So the word Vietnam, right? The concept of Vietnam itself originated with native warrior sisters resisting colonial invaders, uniting people and fighting on the right side of history to push out would-be oppressors, right? Specifically, and this was 40 AD, so 2,000 years ago, right? And so again in Hawaii, right? So it's actually very similar. Hawaii united is not unite so that they could, so that the commitment to unite the island so that he could go and kill other people. The uniting of the island was so that Hawaii would have a block strong enough to resist the invasion, because Kamehameha had read about the divide and conquer tactics that Europeans had used on Native Americans and Africans and Asians, right? So he said, we have to be strong and united as non-white people, as Hawaiians, as indigenous people, because the Europeans are coming to destroy us all, right? And so that was, and so similarly in Vietnam, we have to unite all of us ethnic minorities. They were separate, they were important. Like Hawaii had separate islands with separate individual different peoples that were not one block. They united to resist colonization. In Vietnam, there were 15 plus separate ethnic peoples that didn't have a collective organizing, governing entities. They united and were led to stop the invading colonial army. So this is, again, this is not just like, oh, one time this silver spoon, that's just a fluke accident. No, this is like historical human history of women fighters and political leaders stopping actual evil and actual savagery, right? This is the origin of Vietnam itself: unification to fight against an invading force led by women fighters. And again, the same thing happened in Vietnam. That's why I made the game Decolonators. It was Contra, but Contra is a game made that uses very American-coded white military characters. I'm fighting in an alien invasion, but the word Contra is directly involved in U.S. colonial and neo-colonial murder squads, basically across the world, and particularly in Central South America. Crushing and killing the colonized people down there for the benefit of U.S. corporations and U.S. capital. So I took Contra, and when I made Decolonators, I tried to flip that game on its head. That's why Decolonators has this title screen of Decolonators is a direct reference. The flaming, yellow, white, and red and orange flaming first letter of the D in Decolonators is a direct reference to Contra with the flaming C and the rest of the letters, right? Except Decolonators is about not putting a white dude with the gun as the main protagonist on the right side of history, right? Because the protagonist is who you are empathizing and identifying with, and ostensibly is the good guy, the hero. But the true hero of history is often a heroine, if not the majority of time, and often an indigenous non-white heroine, such as the Vietnamese women who fought and successfully fought along with their male counterparts on the Vietnamese Viet Cong and Viet Minh communist side against the invading U.S. military, oftentimes kicking their ass and taking a lot of prisoners, including John McCain himself, the war criminal and almost U.S. president, who was also in Ukraine, holding up the hands of swastika-wearing Stepan Bandera Nazis in the U.S.-backed coup that began the actual war with the death of tens of thousands of ethnic minorities of Russian descent in the Donbass region. But anyway, that's a little off the topic. The point is that the indigenous, but John McCain was captured and shot down by Vietnamese people. And perp walked, not unlike this indigenous Vietnamese woman, perp walking this white American sad boy because he got his ass kicked. My one dream is to ride the strong wind, tread the fierce waves, kill the whale in the East Sea, regain the country, build independence and self-determination, and destroy the yoke of slavery. And I will never stoop to be a concubine. So that was true. The trend 248 AD. Yet another women fighter against oppression, against slavery, against the attempt to stop self-determination, against actual evil and actual savagery and actual barbarism and etc. So this, it's a woman king. Again, it's just like my point is that I'm trying to tie this. The woman king is not a one-off. It is the history of the world. It is the history in every continent and islands in the Pacific and others. This is not just some random story. This is the story that is not being told enough. It's really, for the rest of time, every action movie should be black and non-white women protagonists, basically. If you want to even start to undo the damage of Hollywood and all Western patriarchal storytelling for the last centuries, every single movie should be 95% non-white people and non-white women protagonists fighting. If you really want to make a change and alter people's perspectives, and not just the movies, the books should be filled with this. The story of the African resistors, the story of the indigenous Vietnamese women resistors, and the against colonization, the story of the Hawaiian resistance against colonization should be mandatory for all European, American, Canadian, Australian, New Zealand children, public, private, and charter school curriculum. But you know what kind of place you live in, right? Well, imagine if you even proposed that. Imagine if you, never mind CRT, never mind 1619, never mind critical race theory, just a little bit of, which is about trying to, move the racism needle just like 1% away from Nazi symbols and, swastikas. The actual history of the world, imagine proposing that to even the most blue state. Not that they're any better, but some people think that. no state and 90% of the United States is not ready for that. Or not that they're not ready for that. They should be ready for that. They need that. But that's why we need rogue educators, and that's why I stream. Because nobody's going to fucking do this. In the West, in English. I mean, they tell the truth in Vietnam and in global South countries, but not in the Western world, not in the English-speaking world, not in the French and the Spanish-speaking world. Custer was knocked from his horse by a buffalo calf road woman. The U.S. wants to forget that its genocidal, thieving settler men never defeated the indigenous people, and the woman beat their great white commander, the great white man commander. The U.S. fought natives like it fought Vietnam to stop communism. Again, right? The natives were so barbaric. Native Americans were just scalping and hooping and hollering ultra-violent Indians. We Americans had to civilize them, right? That's the narrative that America tells. That was the point of the John Wayne movies, the cowboy movies, the lone, all of those movies are about trying to reinforce this idea that the U.S. has always been justified, and it was trying to help those savages, right? By removing their life and taking their land and putting a bunch of white people on it with black slaves and destroying it and turning what were successful mass amazing, ecologically sound farms of, 1,000-year-old trees collaborating with corn and squash and the bean, the Three Sisters, with maintaining the soil, maintaining ecosystems in harmony with people and nature, and taking all of that North American success of the indigenous people and then turning it into wildfire, Category 7 NATOs, oil spills, degraded monocrop, cotton and tobacco, ripping everything up and selling it off for profit, destroying the planet, burning the biosphere, burning the atmosphere, right? But we had to do that, because if we didn't take all the native people's land, maybe they might have scalped us or something. No, the reality is it's very one-sided story, but it's reversed so that it looks like the native people were the people doing the savagery. The reality is, even climate scientists will tell you to this day, because climate scientists are having an extreme difficulty. There's a cognitive dissonance you have to have as a white climate scientist. How can you be a climate scientist and come to the realization empirically that giving indigenous people control of the land and land back is actually, by the numbers, the only way, right, to stop things like the eradication of the lungs of the earth, the Amazon rainforest, and also to deal with the climate emergencies, not just because of the water protecting, where indigenous people stop 25% of the carbon emissions of the U.S. and Canada, despite being less than 5% of the population, but just because of the practices and the ways, the controlled burns, the regenerative agriculture, the pluricrop ways, the maintaining of ecosystems, and also feeding and clothing and housing all the people at the same time. Just from every rubric, it's like there is no other option. But the thing is, if you try, so it's a huge dissonance because, but I live in the United States of America, where we live in a capitalist system. We have a capitalist Euro white-centric system, but the science is telling me the opposite, right? Anyway, but that's part of science and the storytelling of science itself, right? And when you try to tell that story, climate scientists routinely get arrested and shot in a lot of countries. In the same way that archaeologists who said indigenous people have been here since time immemorial have all lost their careers and become homeless or gone destitute and crying into the mountains of student debt, right? Anyway, so the history of the United States and the fights have to be told, as well as the history of the struggles and sometimes the direct military conflicts between the native people of the native indigenous Turtle Island people or North American people and the people from Europe has to also be told, like the Woman King, right? Prey is good, but Prey is kind of, the side story is that the French were there. Although Prey is good, but there should be a Woman King about Buffalo Calf Road Woman, right? The true story of how some indigenous people beat and killed an American officer of the military and were on the right side of history at the same time, So where's that movie? I'm waiting for that one. Jordan Peele, Taika Waititi, Viola Davis, and John Boyega, produce this movie, please. Cheyenne warrior Buffalo Caffrey woman is credited with knocking Custer from his horse before he died. Women shoved awls into Custer's ears to open them up so that he could hear better after in the afterlife because he refused to listen to this one. Happy Victory Day. And I bring up also for the socialist, communists, and leftists. I don't even know what that word means in English anymore. MAGA communism is trending on Twitter and Google. So and in the Western world. So I don't know what the fuck what do words even mean? What do words mean? Who cares? Who cares? Let's just make some money in the chaos as we destroy the meanings of everything, right? In postmodern glee. Unless some system is marked out by which there shall be a separate allotment of land to each individual, you will look in vain for any general casting off of savagism. This is from the U.S. Department of Indian Affairs. Common property and civilization cannot coexist. That's the words of the United States Department of Indian Affairs. As I think I've pointed out on this channel before, so I won't take too much time. The United States has always identified the indigenous people, the native people of Turtle Island. The Native Americans have always been identified by the United States at the highest levels and at every other level as communist. And now the thing is, communism and civilization were deemed antithetical as polar opposites, as things which could not coexist. Either, and by extension, civilization meant capitalism. Private ownership of land and resources was part and parcel, and literally civilization itself. So civilization, again, what the fuck does civilization mean? Right? If capitalism is barbarism as it is, in terms of like how many people it's caused to suffer and die, and if capitalism is savagery and civilization is the opposite of savagery, right? That's the doctrine of discovery. We the missionaries from the Belgian Catholic missionaries or the Christian Protestant missionaries, we are going to civilize you savages. But to be civilized means to be capitalist, and to be capitalist means to be savage. Then what the fuck does civilization? What do any of those words mean? But in the same, just like MAGA communism, right? Let's cause intellectual chaos and make a lot of money, diseducating everybody and making them think whatever we need them to think at the second that words mean whatever the most powerful, whitest, malest, feudalistist person needs that word to mean in that moment in time. And in the next 5 minutes, it can mean something else. Words have no meaning in English and French and Spanish, really, at the end of the day. It just means whatever the most powerful person needs. Whatever CNN and the whatever the CIA jukebox needs, or the feudal, capitalist, colonialist, imperial, NATO jukebox needs a word to mean at that moment will be put into the brains of every liberal, progressive, and conservative through CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and all blue check marks. And then the next moment it might mean something else, but that's it doesn't think about it. Think about it. Just think about it a little bit. Civilization is capitalist. If you're a leftist, I mean, what does that mean? I don't know what the fuck that means in English, but if you're a leftist, if you're a MAGA communist or a communist, what the fuck does that mean? Anyways, the Kandaki of Africa were political and military leaders who. But if you get if you call that into attention, obviously you're a Russian or a Chinese psyop. You're a Russian intelligence agent, right? If you call it into indigenous people have been labeled Russian affiliated media despite having no affiliations, right? So I mean, there's lots of YouTube channels and Twitter and Twitch channels that all been removed from. That's why I only do pop cultural media. I just do pop cultural media opinions. That's all I do. I don't do anything political. And there's nothing political about anything I'm saying. I'm just like talking about I'm talking about Turok. Turok was a really good game with 200 poly, indigenous people. That's all I'm talking about. I'm just talking about video games and movies. I'm not talking about anything political. The people Lee Camp, Abby Martin, Malila Chan, anyone who was Chris Hedges, anyone who was ever, even some who weren't on an actual RT or something like that, they're gone, right? Scott Ritter got his account banned off of like 5 different Western social media sites for just stating basic facts about, numbers of people killed in a war in Europe. And it just, just like, anyways, people who like literally work for the U.S. military and planned wars in Iraq are just like losing their accounts now because they just say basic stuff. So if you contradict that narrative, though, that civilization is capitalism and capitalism didn't kill billions and suffer billions of people, and if you contradict that narrative that capitalism is the greatest thing in the history of the earth, and especially if you contradict the narrative that the United States was justified in its settler colonial capitalist civilizing of native people, you're never gonna make it. You're never gonna make it in any Western corporation, government, nonprofit, and a lot of the academia. The Kandaki of Africa were political and military leaders. So, coming back to Woman King. The Woman King, again, this is, if you don't like the Dahomey kingdoms, if you don't like the people who this movie was based on. Also, what's up, Big Teal? Nothing political. Yeah. When I shake my head, no. That's how that's how you know. When I shake my head, I emphasize the nothing political. You see? That works on a lot of people from the West. You just, you say a thing and they take it at face value and then they move on, right? Like, oh, China created the virus, and Adrian Zenz is a great blue check mark data scientist from Germany, and you should listen to him. Stuff. You go look up who that guy is. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, you should look up. If you don't know who that guy is, you should look. You can just say things. You just say, especially if you say a thing about any country that nobody knows shit about, which is 95% of the countries of the world. People just take it at face value. So I'm just gonna say this is not political, and like 50% of the people that are hate watching this movie because they think that I'm a screeching green-haired SJW woman and also a black N-word at the same time. That's what they accuse. I was accused of being a black. I was accused of being a N-word black nationalist and a green-haired SJW screeching harpy at the same time. I'm like, I'm the quantum silver spook. I'm both a native Hawaiian, indigenous, queer person, non-binary person, a black raging man, and a college, professor, white, green-haired woman at the same time. I'm all the genders, all the colors, all the hair colors, all of the tendencies, all at the same time. But again, that's Western brain, though, right? You can be civilized and capitalist, and at the same time, Vietnam is the most horrible country because it's communist. No, it's not. Vietnam is the most horrible country because it's capitalist. And then you have two Westerns fighting over nonsensical, illusory Western historical accounts of what Vietnam is. But what we agree is that it's the most horrible thing that ever existed because it's not European, obviously. Anyways, Big Two, have you seen The Woman King, by the way? Anyways, but we'll go back. We'll go back to what we're talking about. Big Two is somebody who is a black person, I believe, a black woman, although correct me if I'm incorrect, who is working with who works with and is always in Danny Haifong streams. Danny's going to be joining us soon for a people of color, black indigenous people of color of the world discuss the U.S. and the UK. That's coming up. A new Luna Oi panel is coming soon. But also Big Teal works with the Black Alliance for Peace, if I'm not mistaken, and other black organizations. So that's why I'm giving Big Teal a special shout out, because Big Teal is so often in these streams as well. And this movie is for Big Teal and other people like that. Anyways, Kandaki of Africa were political and military leaders who are also defended their nations, battling toe-to-toe with the Greeks and Romans, defeating both would-be colonizers. The name Candace is the Romanized name for the women warriors that the Romans met on the field and kicked their ass. So again, what I was saying before I kind of went off on a little side trail, is the African women and Women King are just one of many African women warriors and political leaders who fought against colonizers over thousands of years. Let me say that one more time so people get that, okay? There were countless countless, and I have like African history is 70,000 years. Africa is the birthplace of the oldest civilization on the planet Earth, 70,000 years, 30,000 years in Asia, at least what we have like record of in terms of like microliths. Archaeologists and anthropologists that are honest and get ostracized. I think Big Till suggested to me read Black Athena, which I do. I recommend anybody at least check out Black Athena. Black Athena's writer was a white, I believe, British, Jewish, but basically white passing Jewish dude, a white Jewish dude writer in Britain, wrote a book about the Afro-Asiatic roots of Western civilization, meaning Greece, Rome, and Europe itself, right? The Afro-Asiatic roots of classical civilization, and by extension, all of European civilization. Basically saying that Europe was born, its parent was Africa and Asia. In its culture, in its knowledge, in its even its languages, etc. If you go deep enough back, that's what you find. And like the anthropologists and the archaeologists that were sidelined, even the white ones, because most indigenous people and black people were not allowed into any universities, anthropology department, engineering department, or otherwise. I mean, they let the black women do all of the math and the post-Newtonian calculus to put Neil Armstrong, a white man, on the moon, but they wouldn't let them, get like some high tenured position at, I don't know, NYU. I actually met one of the first black woman professor at the North American Science Fiction Convention the other year, and she has a lot of interesting stories about that. Anyways, but the white professors who were trying to tell the truth, like the author of this book about the history of Africa and the archaeologists who were saying indigenous people had been in Turtle Island for 100,000 plus years, all of them have been ostracized and and cast out as nut jobs or radical or they actually said to this author Martin Bernal, they said Martin Bernal is a white author, is an author. He is Martin Bernal is an academic who is trying to stir up racism when we have achieved the racial equality and racial tranquil coexistence has been achieved. And when this book came out in 91, when were the LA riots by? When did Rodney King riots happen, right? What year did the George Floyd, right? Did George Floyd happen in like in the 1800s? Because what the white academia, or just academia generally, which is white, period. What academia was accusing Martin Bernal of was stirring up racial tensions, of cherry picking and of all this stuff in the same way, and to try to remove this narrative that, because you learn about Greece and you learn about Rome, that's what you don't learn anything about Africa, you don't learn anything about Asia, you don't learn anything about indigenous people of Turtle Island, except some natives happily ate some pumpkin pie, and that was the last racist white person shook hands along with the pilgrims, and they had some candy corn and they had some yams and shit, and then racism was over. Right? And no genocide happened in America. That's what you learn in American history books. That's what American history books are full of. I remember I went to a $20,000 a year private school, and they taught basically that. And the native people should just sit down and let America run shit. The people who try to disrupt that narrative were all sidelined, just like Martin, because it disrupts the origins of all of Western civilization. That's the only place you learn about Greece and Rome. I remember reading Greece, and then the Roman the Roman great president had his unpaid laborers. His slaves. Unpaid laborers run up the mountain. Right. Nero had all of his freedom and democracy loving, and all the Greeks, they run up the mountain and grab ice to make his ice cream. And the Greeks, they just had such a pleasant society filled with oligarchs and slave-owning people, and they just were constantly at war with each other. And but they were fighting on the right side, just like Leonidas in 300, made by fascist Zack Snyder. Freedom-loving Zack Snyder. You can't tell the history of Africa and Asia. You have to just start at Greece and Rome. Because if you dig back far enough, you're going to find that the peoples there was never any white. Everyone didn't all look like Gerard Butler and Chris Pine in Greece. You know, Wonder Woman is the closest you get, and that Wonder Woman had a lot of people upset about that movie because number one, there were women warriors. Number two, there were black people in Greece, and they were identified as Greek, right? So that's a whole nother thing. Though it's not just the last 500 years of history. It's the last 2,000 years. It's the last 70,000 years. It's the last forever of history. Because really, 100,000-year-old. Let me see if I can find that author. There's an indigenous author who is only in 2022. Only in 2022, right? Is where is it? I had the link for it. Indigenous people in America for hundreds of thousands of years. Where's the author that was talking about that? Study humans. Yeah, there was a specific author, an indigenous native academic, I think archaeologist, who has spent like the last forever. She spent like the last 30 years. She spent the last 30 years trying to convince Western so-called science that Native people have been in the Americas for countless decades, if not time immemorial, possibly millions of years, but it's unclear. That it gets a little more murky, but at least well beyond the Bering Strait and the land ridge, right? And only in the last like 2 years, has it even been getting any credence. It's still, but again, the United States still does not want to tell that story. So what I'm bringing that up for is because it's not just the last, like, it's not just the last, the truth. Not that the truth has to be told about the United States for the last 250 years. Obviously, that's necessary. Slavery, genocide. It's not just the truth about the last 500 years of colonial plunder, of the Belgians in the Congo, of the British all over Africa, of the French in Senegal, of the of all of the Europeans in every continent. It's not just that. It's all the way back to Greece and it's back to Rome. It's beyond that. It's back to the entire history of humanity is filled to the brim with Western Eurocentric disinformation. And it's not the academia would not be sidelining the native peoples, like the woman who was pushing this narrative. There's a plethora of evidence, as I said before. You can blow up almost any part. You can, you're digging to make a new mall in Cincinnati, or you're blowing up a hole to make a highway through a tunnel in Georgia. You're gonna find, you're highly likely to find human towns and settlements and remains, because they've been there so long. Evidence of human tool making and organized civilization going back tens of thousands of years. It's just all of those studies. Again, hundreds of archaeologists, white archaeologists in the 20th century, right? Especially after the carbon dating technology got good enough, after the 1950s or so. Hundreds of archaeologists have either lost their careers or have had their careers threatened if they published their findings on these facts. So all of that, and there's a very good reason. Because if it was proven that indigenous people had been there since time immemorial, along with other evidence suggesting that indigenous people are necessary to maintain climate stability, supporting indigenous claims are actually necessary for reparations and just for justice, all of a sudden the United States starts to just the narrative that maintains the world's most horrific superpower that enforces global capitalism, is the leading cause of death by military, industrial, hellfire missile, etc., is the greatest threat to the humanity and the rest of the planet through nuclear war and through the maintenance of global capitalism, etc., The U.S. military, as the number one consumer of carbon emissions globally, as a single entity, so the academia and universities in the Western capitalist world serve a very important purpose, and there is billions of dollars that goes into stopping the uncovering of these narratives, into stopping the uncovering of the history of Africa and Asia, into stopping and uncovering all those narratives. And that's so even more so, right? Again, that goes all the way back through since time immemorial. Like the Europeans have only existed, maybe a few thousand years. but they have been lying since time immemorial. You go back to 65 million years BC. I'm sure there's some dinosaurs going to be like, this guy dressed up with a Confederate hat, wearing the Queen of England's crown. I mean, they don't know their own history. But some white person showed up with a DeLorean in 65 million BC and started spreading propaganda that the dinosaurs were all white and that there were no black dinosaurs. And I don't know what they were doing in 65 million BC. I don't know what they thought was going to come of that. But just in case they could make some money with white supremacy and capitalism, they made sure to lie about the dinosaurs all being very pale-skinned lizards and maybe with some light tan stripes, just to include the Latinos. Anyways, that's a joke. I don't think that there's a time-traveling white supremacist NATO think tanker showing up in the Jurassic Age. In Jurassic Park, certainly. The guy who runs Jurassic Park is a white supremacist capitalist. And that's why he made a lot of money and screwed up, just like Elon, making broken cars. Anyways, the Kendake of Africa were political and military leaders who also defended the nations, battling toe-to-toe with the Greeks and the Romans, defeating both would-be colonizers. The name Candace is the Romanized name for the women warriors they met on the field, and they kicked their ass. So the thing about the Candaces, again, that was thousands of years ago, right? They were around thousands of years ago. In the legacy of the people of this, in the legacy of this one people of Africa in the 1800s, the Kendake were political and military leaders in Kush or Ethiopia who fought on the front lines of battle in defense of their people. The Kendake pushed back Alexander the Great. I'm gonna put anytime any white man, military or political leader or CEO ever gets mentioned and it has the Great in it, I'm gonna put the quotes around it. Alexander the Great, because it's not so great, right? And using brilliant military tactics, the Kendake defeated the Roman invaders, forcing them to sign a peace treaty. The name Candace is what the Romans knew these warrior women as because they met Kendake on the battlefield. So, importantly, Western white man politicians, European white man politicians and generals and other leaders never go to the front line of battle, unlike in these indigenous cultures. Neither do the wealthy oligarchs that pay them and maintain control of their so-called democracies and so-called republics, and also, and that's a very important fact, because I made this point. If you want really, I'll go really deep on this point in the video I made about Wonder Woman. Where did I do that one? Ghostbusters. Shit. I made so many videos. I can't. Every week I'm making a new. Oh, there it is. Wonder Woman and War. I make up this. Actually, Wonder Woman is another good connected to all of this, because Wonder Woman is a movie, right? Not 1984, the first one that was directed by a woman director. Wonder Woman is another movie that number one, it shows, like I said, is one that got pissed off a lot of people because it had black and non-white people in Greece. So that starts to break the European civilization is founded on pure white genes, pure white Jesus, and white, Jesus is a white blonde hair, blue eye guy that you can put on your wall. He wasn't, he was actually a brown guy. White Jesus, white Greece, white Rome, and everyone was white, and and the statues, they were all colored, and they had million watt glare, bright white, pasty ass complexions. I'm sorry, they had different. The Greeks had different colors, but their noses, all the noses are smashed off because why? Because nobody could have a wide black nose. Everyone had to be a white nose. And so when the Wonder Woman had black women warriors, had black, same thing. It's actually very much like Woman King. Wonder Woman had black warriors, and they had black woman warriors, and they had black woman warriors in what's supposed to be a pristine, eugenically perfect white apotheosis of civilization called Greece. So you had black women warriors in this movie. Now that was enough to people lose their shit. But anyways, but it's also the truth. And also, Wonder Woman also talks about, because Wonder Woman's character reiterates that we should fight to stop this war. We should not sit back and allow the war to continue, right? But then there are British, American, and other European men who are capitalists, wealthy executives, industrialists, and feudal rulers like British and Austrian and French and other aristocrats who all, and monarchs who also, this is very important. As I said many times, Neofeud is about how feudalism and capitalism never morphed into each other. Never one ended and the other started. They've always been there together for the history of the last thousands of years. There were British monarchs who were also millionaires and billionaires. King Charles is a billionaire and a monarch. Let me say that again. King Charles is a billionaire. He is a massively wealthy capitalist. It's actually illegal to be anti-capitalist in Britain. If you teach anti-capitalism in schools, or if you have a test with your A levels and you put the Das Kapital quotes in it, it's illegal. It's literally illegal. They passed a law 5 years ago. It's illegal to teach anti-capitalism in any British school. So the British monarch is both a capitalist, King George, and a feudal ruler based on blood dynasty and white supremacy, and a colonizer. So this idea that you went from one to the other is just nonsense. Also, the ruler has more power in the shadows. They don't talk about this, but all the members of parliament, including the prime minister, the British monarch has to approve the most important governing policies go through the monarch. So the monarch, it's still feudalism. The parliament is a joke. It's all billionaires and feudalism It's all billionaires and kings and queens and king-queen billionaires and techno kings. You see like, what? But is he a feudal ruler? Somebody said, I'm going to invent this new thing. It's called corporate monarchism. And I said, that's just normal Westernism. The British rulers had corporations like the Hudson's Bay Corporation. This idea of, we went from British, feudalism, and then we had corporations. No, they already had corporations. They already had mass wealth accumulation. Where do you think all of the Opium War billions of dollars were accumulated into? Do you think they went into a magical hat called America that was capitalist, and all the British executives and feudal lords and ladies and queens? Do you think that the money went to America capitalism, and only feudal blood? All they had was a bunch of blood in their veins in Britain. It's not like London was full of wealthy, plundering colonizers, right? Do you think that all of Britain only had knights and lords and ladies, and all the money went to capitalist America? No, the capitalism and feudalism are fused at the hip, and they're not gone. They're together in bed with King George and all of the pedophilic abused children that Andrew, the family member who has been enabled by Queen Elizabeth, have always been in fucking bed with, and Epstein, who have all been in bed with each other, literally, horrifically, war criminally, and economically. And I don't know why people are confused about this, but I know why people are confused about this. It's the same reason why they're confused about everything else. Anyways, the word progressive is a word that was designed to propagandize the masses of Europe and its English-speaking world into believing the word progressive itself is a word that was manufactured in order to give the illusion that change in a positive direction was happening. But in fact, nothing was happening. And Horace Greeley, Karl Marx's boss, actually was one of the most racist people who also self-labeled a progressive. Horace Greeley of the New York Tribune. Karl Marx was the London correspondent. I'm not saying that Marx was like Jonathan Swift, like Voltaire, were one of the kind of outliers that were like, there's something really wrong with what Europe and these rulers are doing. But they were outliers, and they didn't actually end up changing Europe or the United States. Not yet, anyway. But anyways, okay, so back to Africa though. So back to this Kendake. So it's important to remember the Kendake existed long before this, and they fought colonizers, would-be invaders. The Romans came and they tried to crush parts of Africa and take them for the Roman Empire. They failed because I want to see a movie where Chris Pine plays some bratty ass Roman, because Chris Pine's doing all this base shit like Don't Worry, Darling. Which is about Chris Pine plays Jordan Peterson talking about the Chaos Dragons having Stepford wives in Don't Worry, Darling. So Chris Pine should play, so Chris Pine is doing all this cool stuff, and everybody's like, don't watch Don't Worry, Darling, because it takes a shot at patriarchy and abusive ass Jordan Peterson. Feminism is the death of Western civilization thinking. I mean, it's actually not incorrect, but Western civilization is not a civilization. Anyway, I'm not going to go back on the civilization. What the fuck does this word mean? But, Chris Pine should play Caesar, one of them, a white Roman guy. And I'm just free pitch. Feel free to steal this. Anybody, Viola Davis, John Boyega, Taika Waititi, feel free to take this idea and make it. Chris Pine plays a greedy, spoiled brat Roman emperor, right? Viola Davis plays a Kendake political and military leader who goes to the front lines, personally fucks up dozens and dozens of Roman white boy soldiers. Tom Hardy can play one of the Roman soldiers, and he gets his head chopped off by Viola Davis. And Viola Davis and African women beat the crap out of the Romans and kicked their asses out of Ethiopia and Africa. And it's like The Woman King, but with a happier ending, because the Romans didn't make it past. All right, and that's the next movie. That's like 2023's Academy Award winner. Just take all the awards. Just take all of them. Best acting, best writing, best non-white movie. We don't need a category for that because but there's so few movies at this point that you can't really do that. But best acting, best directing, best casting, best score, etc. But that's the next one is the African women military and political leaders fight on the front lines, unlike the Roman who sits on his throne and all the Roman oligarchs and all the Greek oligarchs sitting on their ass, collecting money, owning slaves, drinking their fine wine, while all of their slaves and their poorer people go off and go die for empire. Kind of like, I don't know, Biden sending off poor American black and brown and white boys to go die in Iraq and Afghanistan and die in Taiwan. Or at least that's what they want right now. This is where, the indigenous saying in spiralic time, history is cyclical, history repeats itself. History is neither, the present is not gone, and the past is not past, and the future is with us. All of our grandchildren, because the same process is happening in this moment. You're seeing it happen. You're seeing it happen right now. You're seeing indigenous women on the front lines of the DAPL and the oil fields that are being black snaked through their lands. It's indigenous women fighting on the front lines to stop all of the poisoning and death of their communities and this entire planet. Right? There are men that are also there, but the women are leading it, and it's majority women and queer people. So, 2,000 years ago, the same thing happened in Africa that's happening. Not exactly the same. It's not all fighting with necessarily swords or guns. Sometimes it's fighting with your body on the front line, because it's a different material condition and a different reality. But it's still indigenous women leading it. And that's the history that, where are we going to get that? Where are we going to get that, except because the school system, right? Is Ron DeSantis' schools in Florida going to teach in a textbook this? Is are the more than half of the schools ban CRT. Never mind this. It has to be rogue movie makers, rogue educators, and non-white storytellers, game makers, movie makers, people on fucking social media, Instagram, influencers. It has to be rogue people out, because if the United States had a government like Cuba or Vietnam or Venezuela or some of the other places that's capable of doing anything for the masses and on the good, then you could maybe like try to get, I'm not saying you shouldn't try to have a better lobby to push your school, your whatever government to, have better education systems on that. That's why we home educate, because there's no education system in the United States. But until you have, it's very difficult because it's a white supremacist, capitalist, hegemonic from the commanding heights, government, economic, business, and by extension, school system. So the education at this moment has to come from people like me saying, go fucking watch this movie. And people making these stories that are like interesting, compelling, they make you laugh, cry, entertaining. You can eat popcorn to them. And also, they're telling the truth about these things, because it ain't going to come from Texas's textbooks. It ain't going to come from Michigan's textbooks. It ain't going to come from California's textbooks. Sure as hell ain't going to come from Joe Rogan's podcast. It's not going to come from MAGA communism. What the fuck does that even mean? It's not going to come from Tucker Carlson, the most popular news show in the United States. It's going to come from people going out on a limb and trying to figure out how to build alternate economic business models and economic sovereignty within socialist, anti-racist, anti-imperialist ideological clusters within the extant, racist capitalist government and business norms, and then trying to spread against, that's why I always just go, this is just pop cultural review. Because most, as I said, the average Westerner, they hear that word and they're like, oh, that's what he's doing. I feel really pissed off when I watch that Silver Spook stream, but he's just doing pop cultural review. And that's why, hey, Lee Camp and Chris Hedges and, Scott Ritter, that's why I have a Twitter and a YouTube channel and an Instagram, and y'all don't. Because, just saying. Anyways, I'm not saying that they should have their channel, but they live in, they underestimate, they underestimate the barbarism of their empires, and I don't, and I think that I'm a little darker than them. I think there's something to that. Anyways, these people they're confused. They think they live in a place with freedom of speech, but you're too white and too male in a place with freedom of speech. You start getting confused. You start drinking your own Kool-Aid. Fighting wasn't always okay. Finally, okay, it's already won. So I want to go a little longer on this because why the fuck not, right? This is like, yeah, we're just talking about like, are we team John Boyega or are we team Viola? That's how we're talking about. Are we team Jacob or are we team Edward? Except not Twilight. That's all. I'm just talking about my face. I'm just like standing my movie face. That's all I'm doing right there. I'm saying Yas Queen. That's all I'm saying. And Yas Woman King. Anyways, fighting wasn't always guns and swords, of course. Emma Kaleleo not only fought for the world's first universal healthcare system in 1859 in Hawaii, the U.S. invasion banned our language, restricted women, and our healthcare after illegal occupation. So important, like, it's not like every time you fight, it has to be fighting like in direct military conflict, because obviously, like I made a whole thread about that. That's not the conditions of every people and every time. It's also like to get to the point of having a society that was fighting on the right side means like the maintenance of the society itself, right? You can't just like, if everybody, all they do all day long is train for the military, right? You're going to have a hyper militarized, you're going to easily get fascism, right? Somebody says, everyone was told for the last 15 years, go into STEM. All the kids in the US, go into STEM. And somebody's like, wait, why is there like rising fascism almost here already, right? It's like, well, I mean, yeah, because if everybody is like, not that the humanities are perfect, like I'm already calling them out, but I mean, if people don't have an education about their history and their society, and have a healed, functioning society outside of the military, you can have a military calling itself communist, but if they don't have an actual communist education, it could just become MAGA communism with lots of white guys with guns going, Donald Trump, he's a socialist. We're here to take back America. I mean, that is America. America is a hyper militarized, like Rome, right? Watch 300 again. Hyper militarized, military only, no collective mass education, no inward looking, no, healed society, no real justice, right? America is no justice, right? No justice, no peace. And America said, well, fuck justice, right? And so if you have a hyper-militarized society that isn't also doing the other work in as to create full, complete human beings in a win-win cooperative society, in trying to network with other anti-colonial, anti-imperial, anti-capitalist, etc., win-win cooperative societies, that's not enough. So it's kind of like you have to, so it's not. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that like we should not simply glorify the violence. Although, as I said, like I'm not a pacifist in absolute terms. Like if there was like a necessary fight, I'm not going to say that we shouldn't fight. I'm not going to say, well, the Woman King and the people were bad because they fought, and that's bad, right? They should have done a nonviolent protest and held up sound. The Africans should have just like put on pussy hats and walked down the street with some signs. That wouldn't work in that time period. And just doing polite government permitted protests in the United States obviously does not work that good either, which is why they encourage upper class lawyers and IT white women to wear pussy hats and walk down the street from the Democratic Party's inner sanctums. Because, I mean, there's a place for education and certain actions, especially like direct actions that impact capital and settler colonial interest itself. Like the water protectors are doing something very different than walking down the street with a sign or dressing up like a handmaid. I'm not saying that the Handmaid's Tale doesn't say important things, but I mean the way that some of those are held. Anyways, I'm getting in the weeds with that. My point is that like sometimes the type of struggle and the tactics taken in a time, in a place, in a material and historical reality have to be all it has to be analyzed and then the strategy decided. But you can't fight on the right side of history, spending 90% of all of your time learning how to use weapons good, right? Even though people did have to train in this time and to make this movie, but that cannot be the sum total of the society. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out. Anyways, so fighting wasn't in Hawaii. So anyway, in Hawaii, fighting wasn't always guns and swords. Of course, Emma Kaleleo Nalani fought for the world's first universal healthcare system here in Hawaii in 1859. The U.S. invasion banned our language, restricted women and our healthcare after illegally occupying us. So, a push failed in the Hawaii legislature. Number one, Hawaii had a legislature. So sometimes I do Hawaiian history videos. I try to throw that in there, but if you didn't know, Hawaii had a actual democracy with racial equality and the world's first universal healthcare system and lots of other things. And Hawaii also created its universal healthcare system with leadership from an indigenous woman. That's kind of the point of this story. She went on foot after the push failed in the legislature to raise money, walking up and down the streets of Honolulu, all the way down to down the coast of Oahu, to raise money. She personally did this to start the world's first universal healthcare system that offered at no charge healthcare to all the people of Hawaii, and to people who just showed up and they weren't citizens. They also got care for a very, very low fee. It was like $1. So it was things that Cuba have, things that a lot of Asian communist countries have, things that countries in the I'm not using the Nordic model because they're straight up going full NATO Nazi at this point, but and also the healthcare is not that universal when you add in the treatment of Muslim and non-white people in places like Sweden and Germany. But Hawaii had a universal healthcare system that was fought for by a Native woman. That's the point I want to bring up. That's a picture of the hospital. When the push, I just said that. That's a picture of it. Kalakaua was another one of the leaders. And this is Iolani Palace that had electric lights before the White House of the United States. So those are other successes that we had in Hawaii before the U.S. occupation. So the story of Hawaii is actually a lot like the story in Woman King. It's not as much of a direct military conflict, but unfortunately, the place where the country that the Woman King fought for with the other women fighters was sadly later heavily suppressed by European colonizers, right? And then you know the rest of the history of Europe and Africa. That doesn't mean that their fight was bad, that they were wrong, because because their country was not independent and prosperous. Sometimes you fight and you lose. If you're an indigenous person, as a black historian Gerald Horn pointed out, if you're indigenous and if you fight, you were wiped out. The indigenous who fought were destroyed, annihilated, wiped out. The indigenous who tried to assimilate were destroyed, annihilated, and wiped out. So in both cases, so it's an incredibly tragic story for many peoples. There's a movie, The Warriors. Speaking of warriors, there's a movie, Warriors of the Rainbow. I bring it up sometimes. That's a story about the native, they're Pacific indigenous peoples. The Hakka people are Austronesian peoples. Sidik Valley is a movie about indigenous people in Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, under Japanese and Euro colonialism, but Japanese at that time. They fought, they resisted. Dozens of their peoples are extinct. Multiple languages are extinct now because fighting, they died. The ones who assimilated and didn't fight, many of them are Christian, Japanese identifying, and also they are wiped out. And some of them just go wiped out anyway, even though they didn't fight. The Japanese chemically weaponed them, and so that I bring that up because these are very the struggle as a colonized person under imperial conquest, whether you fight or you do not, sometimes it's very tragic. Whether you fight, you will be crushed. If you don't fight, you will also be crushed. Differently crushed, but crushed nonetheless. Which tactic to take in which time is never obvious. The colonizers are not going to give you an inch to figure out which one to take. They lie, they cheat, they steal, they make up stories about themselves and everyone else and you. And so it's very difficult. And so I bring it up because Hawaii succeeded in the 1890s. Hawaii was illegally occupied and the U.S. invaded and couped the country and was forcibly made a colony of the United States. Hawaii has been a colony of the United States. Technically, it is an independent country, but it's but based on the actual de facto power, the United States is basically a long-term military occupation. There's a lot of places that are kind of like that. South Korea is one. Taiwan basically has a long-term Western-backed occupation. Okinawa is another. And so, like, those are struggles that are the struggle to get the universal health care. Now, Hawaii was a great success because Hawaii had in the time when the Woman King takes place in the 1800s. Hawaii was a since I'm talking about it, I'm gonna go into this real quick. Hawaii is since the 1800s, or since in the 1800s, Hawaii was a place where somewhere I'm gonna have it. Here it is. Yeah. So many Americans think Hawaiians lived in huts prior to colonization. The U.S. actually deindustrialized us. Before 1898, we already had electricity, mass transit, and railroads. So this is some of the. So these are successes that we had fighting in a different way. Is another way to think about it. Fighting by trying to outsmart and outwit the Europeans, the British and the French. Again, in the same time that the people of Africa were being annihilated, billions of people were being enslaved, impoverished, crushed. The century of humiliation for China. 1/5 of the planet's population was the 1850s to in 1950, right? And in that time, it's the humiliation for the entire planet's non-Euro and Euro collaborator world, right? In that same time, Hawaii built the most prosperous, the most technologically advanced civilization on the earth. And by choosing to fight in a different way. If Hawaii chose, I want to reiterate, Hawaii could have chosen. Somebody said, Silver Spook, why do you Hawaiians have a Union Jack in your flag? People don't understand history and reality. They ask me questions like this. Why do you have a Union Jack in your flag? Does that mean that you're British and you're monarchist and you're bad and all this? Why did Hawaii have a queen and a king? And the reality is, like, the reason why, the reality is the people who are at least in name king and queen, the flag that has at least on its face a British flag. If Hawaiians did not put a British Union Jack in our flag, we would have been fully colonized and eradicated. If we did not call our elected leader that was actually practicing socialism as more like the president of Cuba, or a communist party of China, because de facto the masses had no homelessness. The masses had worker cooperatives. They had universal health care. The masses, again, the first in the world, predating anything in the West by at least a century, actually. New Zealand, Germany, Otto von Bismarck brought privatized and some mixed public health insurance 25 years after Hawaii's full universal health care, full, no money exchanged. Germany, Great Germany, while it was colonizing Africa, chopping up Africa in Berlin. When the Germans say, oh, we're much better than West Europeans, remember that Africa was sliced up like a piece of cake in Germany. Germans coined yellow peril, the anti-Asian the German colonial war trope. So in that time where Africa was being annihilated by Europe, when it was being carved up in Germany, that didn't bring universal health care. Hawaii already had universal health care. Hawaii had mass transit. Hawaii had had black citizens. Hawaii had electric lights before the White House. Hawaii had all of these things, despite being a non-white country. If Hawaii had chosen, right, to call our head of Hawaii the head of the Communist Party, the president, the elected leader of the communist Hawaiian country, there would be no Hawaii for that entire, because you know why? Because Europeans would say, communism, pop quiz. What is civilization to the West? What is civilization? Capitalism, right? What is capitalism, feudalism, monarchy, capitalist, feudalist monarchy, and a republic with representative bourgeois oligarchs behind it, depending on what time it is. You know? If Hawaii said, we are a communist, if Hawaii put something like this up as its flag and said, we are communist Hawaii, we stand for the liberation of all peoples of the world, and we all, less than 1 million of us, will fight all of you British, American, French, and German, and Italian, and Portuguese, and Spanish capitalist colonizers, because we are the great Hawaii, and the Europeans are going to do this. They'd be like this. Oh, really? You and whose army? Because we are the Europeans. We are civilization. Oh, great Hawaiians. We are Europeans. And communism is savagery. And like heathen non-Christians, savagery must be cleansed by the great white light of European Christian civilization. Even Hawaiians miss this point. Do you have a monarchy? We are the great British Empire. For if you do not have a Christian, preferably Anglican, Kahumanu asked specifically for Anglican Christian missionaries. Not because she loved fucking Christian missionaries, and they call themselves the kings and queens, not because they love kings and queendom. There's some Hawaiians that are obsessed with, sadly, they're diseducated, that are obsessed with returning to monarchy and being king and queen himself. This is your Euro-feudalism, temporarily embarrassed prince and princess mindset. It sucks, but that's part of colonization, is mass disinformation. Hawaiians did not choose to put the Union Jack in the flag, put a cross on their government buildings, and have specifically Anglican Christianity, because they love Christianity. The Christians did wonderful things for the other brown people in America with the doctrine of discovery. Do you think it's amazing? It's amazing how stupid Europeans think Hawaiians and other native peoples were in that time. Hawaiians were the most literate people on the planet, 98% literacy rate. I'm gonna come to that. Right? Do you really think the Hawaiians who had read about what billions of people had suffered for not having Christianity and calling themselves collectivists or communist had happened? Do you think this is like, Hawaiians, they loved the white people so much. They had 21 gun salutes in front of their Euro style palaces. No. This is why Hawaiians kept their culture and their history alive in secret, and then it became a little more explicit with the Merry Monarch Festival in the late 1800s with Kalakaua. In fact, I would argue that's part of why Hawaii was overthrown. So you see, there's no perfect way out of this thing, because now people go back and go like, white and Western and white inside their brain historians, like Hawaiian or whatever color outside, and they're white in their brain historians, look back at Hawaii and go, oh, look at the great monarchy we have. We should return to monarchy. And we loved Britain. Britain's not going to help Hawaii out. Are you fucking kidding me? The UK with AUKUS is sailing up Hawaii's ass trying to start nuclear war in the Pacific. I heard people go like, but dude, Hawaii, we love Britain. We should try to side with Britain. Or you should try to side with Britain. Britain's going to help. What the fuck is Britain going to do? Britain is too busy plundering the rest of this goddamn planet, putting sanctions on Russia and China with the United States. Britain is just America's little bitch now, so what the fuck are they going to... Anyway, it's just like, you don't even know your own broken Western false history of Hawaii, sadly. But, you know, it's a very important point. You can't really understand this history of Hawaii unless you understand all of human history, really. You can't really understand anything about any history. You have to go beyond all of Western history and all of, and not just history. You have to go all the way into prehistory, really. You know, the Chinese, they want to talk about conversations with the Chinese. It's one thing I will say. They start like 30,000 years ago a lot of the time because they want to make sure you cleanse all of the, you know, not that they have perfect history, but you want to get rid of all of the disinformation and think comprehensively, dialectically through time. You don't want to just like start, oh, look, there's somebody wearing a crown. That means monarchy good. Oh, look, MAGA, communism. Donald Trump didn't like, Donald Trump supported working class people, and that's a communism. MAGA, but you see, if you don't think comprehensively, historically, you don't be like, oh, that was a campaign slogan. Donald Trump was a billionaire, never was a socialist. That was a slogan. MAGA is intentionally tied to Trump. It's a Republican white-wing slogan that has nothing to do with actual communism. They don't want this is a bunch of grift. But if you look at if you just look on the basis of what's in front of your face, right? Remember, this is just a pop cultural. I'm just talking about my favorite movies. Teenage Mutant Ninja royalty. That's all I'm talking about. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I just want to see Queen Elizabeth play a Ninja Turtle. That's all. It's just pop culture. Right? I just say that, and then every half an hour, I'm just gonna say that, and then white people will forget. Western people will just forget what I'm saying because they believe what happened in the last. Everything loses its context. Whatever happened in the last 30 seconds, that's all that matters. Anyways, if you don't see things in the entire context, actually, not like watch all of Vosh's videos that have no context. Anyway, if you don't have that, you're gonna be misled, and that's why people are continuously misled because they're trained to think undialectically. They're trained to think in the rapture and the pretty words of the last 5 seconds. That sounds good, and then not integrate that into the entire history that they should be. Anyways, so yeah, turtles in a half shell, turtle power, exactly right. So I'm the queen in a half shell. I want to give if you're a monarchist, free movies. This is a free movie tip for you. Put the queen in a Ninja Turtle shell and have her like swinging around like $400 million diamonds, woven together like a nunchuck. Right? It's like very expensive British ass kicking or something. Because how are you gonna make the crown now? King George is not very photogenic. Not that any of the royalty are very photogenic, but anyways, many Americans think that Hawaiians lived. It's all the inbreeding. Many Americans think that Hawaiians lived in nuts prior to colonization. The U.S. actually deindustrialized Hawaii. Before 1898, I already did that one. Hawaii also had a higher literacy rate than the U.S. and Europe before colonization, the banning of our culture and language, erasure of our history, ghettoization. Hawaiians were also often bilingual and trilingual, world-renowned diplomats. So again, because Hawaiians had the highest literacy rate on the planet Earth, admitted by the Europeans, we also knew about what they had done. Hawaiians had traveled and listened to and read across the planet. The first set of states to ever travel the globe was Kalakaua, along with other Hawaiian diplomats, and went through Asia, Persia, Africa, Europe, Turtle Island, up North and South America. The entire, not just went around the globe, like for some little fun tilt-a-world to put your name in the Guinness Book of World Records. Traveled the nations of the world to hear from and see what was happening there, to build global anti-imperial alliances. Right? So Hawaii knew what colonialism and capitalism and racism was doing to the earth. They were not just like, randomly, I like the way the Union Jack looks, I think I'm going to put one in my flag. Oh, no, they're doing that selectively to maintain the impossible feat of maintaining a small independent country for a century and provide for the masses of the people in despite of the racism, right? So again, this is not to say again that the Woman King and the people in Africa who fought militarily against Europe should have tried the Hawaii route. I'm not saying that. Different material reality. I mean, I don't even know enough about that to even comment about exactly what was happening in their place in that time. But in a lot, there was no guarantee that the Hawaii strategy would have worked out. The hindsight looking back, it's obviously Hawaii could have built in 100 years of a socialist country that has better healthcare and housing than America in 2022. When European commoners were living worse than Hawaiian non-white average people who had universal healthcare. Europeans were dying at the ages, really young ages. Europeans had no actual political power, and Hawaiians actually had, again, they call them kings and queens, but they were all elected. A fact that is missing from a lot of conversations, and even in Hawaii, because of disinformation in Hawaii, and also Hawaii was a place where I'm trying to go to the next one. Where's my next slide? I'm losing my slide. So we had the highest literacy rate in the world. Kalakaua, one of the leaders, invented a subaquatic vehicle where Hawaii had the most technologically advanced civilization, where Jules Verne was dreaming up 20,000 leagues under the sea, right? A story about Captain Nemo in a submarine. Hawaii was a living Wakanda and speaking of African civilizations, indigenous future, more technologically, economically, and sociopolitically advanced than any Western nation. So Hawaii, this is, again, you might have seen this before. This is a picture of Kalakaua's torpedo-proof vessel. He was a political leader and a technologist and an engineer and a diplomat. He was a literal Renaissance man. They talk about Renaissance man in the West, but I don't believe that there really are any. Not really. And if they are, they're probably all going to be under house arrest and or murdered for showing up the aristocracy and royalty. In Hawaii, the political leaders were also engineers and contributing in other ways, right? Because you have to actually prove your merit, right? The li doesn't really translate to king or chief, right? Again, the titles of king and queens they're called that in English because if Hawaii didn't call the leader a king and or a queen, then Europe would have taken Hawaii, and there would be a governor general, and there would be a bunch of slaves and dead Hawaiians, just like everywhere else with brown people. So very important to remember. But in Hawaii, the leaders also had contributed in other ways. What has Biden contributed in terms of technology? What cutting edge, what spacecraft was invented by any American president with not taking the labor of black women like the Hidden Figures women, like I already brought up. What man has ever actually invented anything that wasn't stealing some other generally non-white, generally non-male labor? The answer is none. Hawaii actually had leaders who were both technologists and actual inventors, contributing in multiple ways, and then also became the elected heads of their country. And that's very important because if you look at this is not a one-off. Look at Cuba. Look at China. 8 out of 9 of the top leadership, or I think like 7 out of 9 of the top leadership are excellent engineers who built dams, invented regreening technology to stop environmental decay, stop soil erosion, stop wildfires, alleviated poverty for millions of people, and they built their way up from the bottom for decades to get to the top. So the meritocratic, actually proving yourself to be beneficial to the society, that's just indigenous ways, actually. That's translated into electoral systems and funneled through some kind of feudal airbrushing to stop Europeans from coming in and killing everyone. Oh, you seem so civilized because you have crowns and shit. Okay. And you know how I know this? Because the Queen of England, Victoria, was very close with Emma. Emma, who invented universal healthcare. And the Queen of England wrote in her own journal, she was disturbed at how the ostensible Queen of Hawaii, or the partner of the King of Hawaii, Emma, Queen Emma would talk to and associate and communicate in lively ways. Like she was the Queen of Hawaii. The Queen was friends with the servants, right? And talk to them, associate. The Queen was not allowed of England, right? The Queen of real feudal capitalist unjust places were not allowed to associate with the lower. What did I say about racism and Europe predating the United States and Africa, right? The royalty deemed themselves above and separate, like eugenically a different species, like kind of like elves versus orcs, or elves versus hobbits, right? The Irish are the little frolicking little thingies over there, and Tolkien gives them a nice rap. They're not so kindly written about by the British generally. But we are the high elves, very tall, from Linden, also read London. And down there are some small little things, different species, hobbits down there, little halflings, little thingies that do all of our work. And those little thingies over there, the dwarves, they do all of our mining. But we, the high elves, we are racially manufactured for ruling. So we do not, so European royalty, Emma, but the Hawaiians did not do that, right? The Hawaiians were like, they talked to the commoner. The Makainana does not mean the common lesser people. That means the eyes and the face of the land. It's actually more important in Hawaiian cosmogony and Hawaiian philosophy and values than, being the leader. The people are the low people. The land is more important and is above the people. The people descend from the mother that is the land, and the plants and animals are the elder siblings of people. So to be the eyes and the face of the land, in some ways, in Hawaiian thinking, is actually more important than being Ali. Ali is the power flows. There's a saying in Hawaiian: the power of the Ali flows from the land and from the people of the land, the Makainana. It's not it's only Eurocentric thinking installed into Hawaiian heads and into everyone's head that makes you think, oh, Hawaiian royalty, that's the same as British royalty. No, because Hawaiian the rulers associated with the average people, or the non-leader people, and that disturbed the Queen of England so much. She personally wrote about it. She said, I was infuriated when Queen Emma associated and spoke kindly in a very close way with her servants. It is unbecoming. That was one thing that pissed off the Queen, because again, Queen Victoria and the Queen of Hawaii were close. They actually, I go off about that sometimes. Close. Emma played the Hawaiian leadership played the British royalty, but that's why the Queen of England was confused. Why are you associating with the common people? Because the common people are important and equal to us. That's why we give them universal health care, right? That's why we give them universal mass transit. That's why we let African and Asians come in our country and we don't call them lesser people, because we don't understand your racism, because we're not racist like you Europeans, right? Actually, right? But that's missing. Nobody hears that story. That's why I'm here to tell you this story. The sovereign country of Hawaii had black citizens before the U.S. Civil War. In fact, U.S. slaves that stepped onto Hawaiian soil were considered free. Chinese were full. So black. So if you were one of the women, let's say that you let's say you fought the Europeans and you defeated them in combat, and then they sent even more Europeans to come slaughter you and enslave your people and plunder your country. If you came to Hawaii, and the Chinese came to Hawaii because what were the Europeans doing? What were the British doing? Oh, that's right, opium wars, ransacking the summer palace, pumping industrial quantities of opium and roofing the entire country and plundering it for trillions of dollars, causing the century of humiliation when the British GDP briefly surpassed China for a window of a century is not very long in indigenous time, right? But China's already well surpassed Britain, and India also recently surpassed Britain, and China in purchasing power parity has already surpassed the United States. But it was a century of humiliation. So Chinese, Asians, and Africans were coming to Hawaii because their places were falling. Their places were being destroyed and plundered, and a lot of them fought, and a lot of them died fighting. And if you came to Hawaii, you came to a place that had African full citizens, where if you went to the United States, you were a slave. In Canada, you had segregation and horrible racism. In Europe, you were and still are treated like a second-class human. You're not even treated like a human being if you're black in Europe, if you were really being honest, which Europe is not honest about this. But I'm going to go look at an actual non-white person's take on Germany, and we're going to see what they think about it. Look at Europe. Look at how Europe talks about Ukraine. We let the blonde hair, blue-eyed babies in. The black people have to just stay in the war zone, right? All of Europe, even worse than Americans. Americans at least realize, ooh, it's a little bit cringy in 2022 to be talking about the savage countries see war, and it can't really, the only newscaster who said, ooh, maybe what I said was kind of racist was an American. Because at least they know, well, yeah, that's kind of racist to say those things. Not that we care that much, but the Europeans are just like, savage black and Asian countries have war. We don't have war. And we're not going to let any of these savage black people out of Ukraine. You get to die in a war zone. Only the blonde hair, blue eyed babies come to France, Germany, Sweden, Britain, Spain, right? So in the time of the present, there's still no equality in Europe. In the time of the 1800s, there was absolutely no equality, and there was full slavery in these places. And Hawaii had a sovereign country with black citizens. Chinese were full citizens in Hawaii, and when they were chained up to build the railroads in the west coast of the United States, and mass lynchings. And this is a birth certificate of Moses Allen, an African person, became a slave in the United States. Again, most Hawaiians were bilingual and trilingual. When most of Europe couldn't read, only the highborn only the highborn, feudal and capitalist, which is the same thing, elite, were privy to educations in Europe. Less than 10% or less than 1%, depending on how you count. I argue nobody has an education anywhere in the West, including Europe and the US. But I mean, the ones who could read and write, less than 10%. In the time, Hawaii had a 98% literacy rate. So again, Hawaii was outdoing all of Europe by a tenfold. So Hawaii, and that's why the Europe were worried about that, because they're like, oh no, we can't let a non-white country surpass beautiful, happy white Europe. So African citizens, Asian citizens, full equality, the existing socialism without racial hatred, greater technological advancement in the PLC nation. It put the U.S., West, and Europe to shame, blew the white man's burden out of the water, which is why they illegally crushed Hawaii. So remember, in the time when the Woman King was happening, this is the pictures that America and Britain and Germany and Switzerland and Sweden and Italy were putting in all their newspapers, right? With U.S. and the U.K. carrying Cuba, Hawaii, and other island nations in the Philippines from oppression and ignorance and barbarism to civilization. Britain carrying China, India, Africa. You're fucking a little island with like 2% or less of the world's population. You need to carry 7 billion people to civilization. Britain, really? Away from slavery, vice, ignorance, oppression, superstition, and barbarism. Europe, really? But anyway, this was the kind of things that were being put out there. Asians and Chinese were a threat to the white oligarchy because of the Hui system, whereby they avoided white banks and businesses. Hui were basically co-ops. Chinese also specifically married into Hawaiian families, hence names like Akana and Akau. The word Hui is, I used to bring it up often, but I bring it up since I haven't brought it up recently. The word Hui is a Hawaiian, Chinese, Vietnamese, and Maori, and other Asian and Pacific word. It actually spans 80% of the world, the word Hui, which is Asia and the Pacific. You add it all up, it's like 70-80% of the world. The word Hui is a word that means working together cooperatively without bosses, without landlords, like a housing cooperative, or a workspace where you have democracy of the workplace with no CEO, executives, or board members taking disproportionate amounts of the wealth, right? And that's a concept that has existed in Hawaii and in Asia for countless millennia. Because the migrations from Southeast Asia that went to Hawaii happened thousands of years ago. So what that means is the word Hui, it's pronounced slightly different. In China, it's like Hui. In Vietnam, it's like Hui. It's a little bit shorter, but it's the same word. So it's actually survived thousands of years of distance geographically and temporally. But I would argue it's because the value of win-win cooperation and work. Hui, we're going to do something. We're going to build a wall together. Who's in charge? Nobody's in charge. Who's going to make money? You don't ask that. That's not a question you ask. Who's in charge of this enterprise? No. You were hooing together to do a thing because the community needs that. The community needs this house. That's why we're hooing together. Hui, come here. We're gonna paddle the canoe. Why are we paddling the canoe? Because we gotta catch the fish. Who's gonna profit from the fish that we're catching on the canoe that we're huiing to? Nobody's gonna profit from the fish. We catch the fish because the village needs fish. It's called actual existing socialism that has existed for vast swaths of the time, despite the Western propaganda. But it just speaks to the fact that if civilization is capitalism, the word civilization means capitalism, then also by extension, people. I'm not saying that everybody operated in that way throughout the history of all of Asia and the Pacific, but there were vast swaths of cultures who have more and less operated with such principles at the heart of their ways for thousands of years. And that's not even going to Turtle Island and the indigenous peoples of America. They don't have that word, right? But they have other concepts. When I talk to actual indigenous people from North, Central, and South America, they all will reiterate, yeah, we basically live in that way, right? And even Western U.S. Department of Indian Affairs says, oh yes, the indigenous peoples of the Americas are communists. They're collectivists. So anyway, I'm just trying to reiterate that fact. Anyways, but that's enough on that. This is not a stream about that. This is a stream about Woman King, and it's almost done because it's almost 2. The Woman King checkmates Euro-Centrism is what I wanted to say. So also, sometimes the fights. The point with Emma was that sometimes the fights were historically were again fights of indigenous women in military struggles to stop in non-patriarchal indigenous cultures like Hawaii. Women warriors fought on the front lines militarily to prevent colonial conquest and destruction and eradication and plunder. In Vietnam, also this happened. Vietnam is one of the most based places in the world, and multiple colonizers have been militarily defeated, France and the United States, among others, in the 20th century, because Vietnam has just been one of those places that has so strongly adhered to indigenous women, political and military-led equality, win-win cooperation-based cultures that Vietnam is just, I don't know, it's just like, there's something special going on there that is inseparable from their history. But anyways, the point is that like it happened in Asia, it happened in Hawaii. Indigenous women beat Custer from his horse. In the U.S. settler colonizers in their attempt to prevent the spread of indigenous culture in Turtle Island and communism, and they cannot. Previously, for thousands of years in Africa, there were political and military leaders who were also women who fought both Greeks and Romans and kicked their ass. And in Hawaii, there were later on women who fought for in political and in intellectual and in geopolitics. They fought to maintain a sovereign country, and won for a century at least to provide to the masses universal health care, housing, technological advancement, racial equality, and only the U.S. occupation finally caused a temporary, right, the U.S. illegal military occupation that is poisoning our water to this day, caused a temporary destruction of our ability to read, our health. We are under international law victims of genocide in Hawaii. Again, we have the shortest life expectancy, but this is temporary. It's only been 130 years since the U.S. illegal occupation, right? There are great grandparents who are alive. My great grandparents were alive in a socialist Hawaiian country, and they were deeply saddened. It's only been like 3 to 4 generations. That is a blink in the eye of indigenous peoples of the world. That is a blink in the eye of Native Hawaiians, of indigenous people, of Turtle Island, etc. And the end of the Western colonial capitalist era is ending. And if you'd like to support us, don't forget you can help us out by throwing us some money at Ko-Fi. Consider becoming a Patreon patron if you appreciate all of this education as well, so that we can keep doing it. I'm sorry, we're not doing political education. What we're doing is I'm just commenting on whether mermaids should be black or not. And, you know, obviously we should have black mermaids, but that's not political. This is pop cultural bullshit. That's all we're doing. The Woman King checkmates. But, you know, so the Woman King is a part of retelling the history of the struggle of the world's peoples against, you know, these interlocking systems of win-lose systems generally, mass violence, mass disinformation, and mass plunder, unjust hierarchical systems, colonial systems, patriarchy as one of them, and white supremacy. And so Woman King is a movie that is directly speaking to white supremacy as a all black in Africa based and centered story. It is anti-patriarchal, it's women, and it's also a movie that is by extension is dealing with the colonial. It doesn't necessarily deal direct. I don't know enough to say that it's an anti-capitalist show, but you don't have capitalism without imperialism and colonialism. And so in that sense, it is a story that is poking holes in those Western narratives that continue to maintain global oligarch and billionaire and millionaire fortunes. So long story short, you go watch that show because it's a good show. Also, you know, support John Boyega. I hope John somebody brought up, you know, I'm going to do like a lightning round with just all these little tweets I forgot to get to. So number one, India too. Okay. Well, before I get to that, so India also had a struggle led by women fighters against colonization at one point. Important to bring up. Also, where was that tweet I had? Germany Muslim. I think I'm gonna get it. Yeah. So speaking of Germany, right? And well, there's no racism in Europe. We're all good now. After living in, so this is from this person who is living in Germany and is not white and is a Muslim, so non-white in Germany. After living in Germany for about 2 years, I can confidently say that I don't believe I can leave the house alone without my husband for at least a family member with me. Every single time I have, in fact, been outside, I've been met with a racist German who takes it upon themselves to let me know I'm not welcome here. The latest example was when I was at a mall and forgot I had a Zoom meeting. I ran to the nearest Starbucks inside the mall, wasn't enclosed or anything. My husband took a walk to wait for me. In just a matter of a few minutes, a German lady said my phone was too loud. I could barely hear the phone, and it was already very loud in the mall that was surrounding the Starbucks. Still, I was moved to the far corner away from her so I could try and continue my meeting. 1 minute later, she's still yelling at me. I tried telling her this isn't some library where I had to be silent, but couldn't get a word out as the whole Starbucks filled with white women joining in to yell at me, calling me a nuisance. The phone was almost at the lowest volume. Again, so this is a non-white Muslim woman. You're the only disturbance, one of them said. Then out of nowhere, this man comes up to my face and asks if I understand what they're saying, and then I had to leave. He calls over the Starbucks worker to kick me out. This country is horrible, Germany. I can recount multiple times where very similar things have happened and when I was with my son too, but they never happen when I'm with my husband. No one dares say a thing. So when she's with her husband, white husband, nothing happens. When she's alone, everyone comes out of the woodwork to berate, push out, get kicked out of the Starbucks, the non-white woman. Living in Germany as a Muslim woman means I have to forfeit my independence for my safety. I'd rather stay at home than risk being humiliated time and time again. So that's not even the UK. That's not the US. That's Germany. That's where we're all better now, right? No Nazis in Germany. Not 70% of Germany's leadership were literal ex-Nazis installed by the United States after World War II. Actually, there were more Nazis in power after World War II than before, thanks to the United States' help. So anyway, but I just wanted to point that out. So this is a phenomenon that exists throughout that continent over there. Also. Well, definitely follow Kate Nix, and we'll get to that. I'll do it at the very end, the shout outs. But where's that one? So when people say boycott Women King, elves and dwarves can't be black, mermaids can't be black, indigenous women can't beat a predator. Same racist energy from folks who don't want to see a black produced and centered movie succeed. If you missed it, don't forget, check out my most recent video. So for all the racists who are hate watching this video, just remember racists. Just remember you Queen Stan. Just remember this. You have made the Rings of Power video about black elves and brown dwarves and women protagonists destroying white supremacist fantasy. thanks to all of you racist hate watching shitheads. You know how I know that was hate watchers? Because like half of the video, like most of my other videos, it gets like, most of my other videos, they get like, about 90 something plus percent thumbs up. And it was only this video that I got like 50% of the watchers thumbs this video down. So, hey, guess what, racists? But because so many of you assholes are watching my videos now, you actually pushed it so far up the algorithm. This is the best performing Silver Spook stream of all time. So thanks a lot, you stupid shit. And keep thumbsing it down. I don't care. Somebody said, Silver Spook, you have to settle down. They actually said like, calm down and mend your heart. Some fucking white German, white American was over there like, calm down and mend your heart. You're so hateful. You should be thankful that we helped civilize Hawaii, and you will never have a house and a roof. Stop begging for money. If you just calm down and be quiet, Hawaii and you will be able to work hard and pull yourself up by your bootstraps or some bullshit. And I was like, okay, racist, whatever. Not that I'm gonna be quiet. I mean, obviously I'm not. The funny thing is, actually on Twitter, I actually lose followers. People like quit because they're like, no, but the Queen was not a multi-hundred millionaire war criminal and literally had diamonds stolen and stopped decolonization at every turn, and then took credit for all the places that fought to get decolonization. They're really mad right now. And I'm like, I was talking to Holly, it's like, yeah, they're really mad right now. But on the other hand, it's like, well, fuck you all. Not because I hate. At the end of the day, it's to help those people. But it's very frustrating in the moment. But at the end of the day, if your attempt, like Emperor Palpatine, right? Your resistance only makes Silver Spook's power stronger. You attempt to strike me down with your thumbs down, right? And you only make me more powerful than I can possibly imagine. You've already made this video, so I mean, I just want to give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Bob Trump 36, and I want to give a shout to Bill Clinton 1488, and I want to give a shout out to Monarchist 769. Y'all have helped play a pivotal role in making sure that this video is the most successful Silver Spook video ever. So thanks a lot. You really warm my heart. So you are mending my heart by being racist all over my videos, proving my point. Thanks a lot, white German. Anyways, a thread about what was the other one I wanted to say? Oh yeah, and Squid Game. I don't want to talk about that one right now, but I had one more I wanted to touch on. Oh yeah, speaking of disinformation, yeah, U.S. leaked COVID from a bioweapons lab. So I was talking about disinformation. So there's been years of people saying Chinese Wuhan bio leak destroyed the world with the Chinese bioweapon COVID, and it's come to light. Oh, GlaxoSmithKline, and Pfizer own the lab, and that one's a little more MAGA. It's trying to get people to vote for Republicans, but the U.S. has labs, and now even the Telegraph is coming out saying, oh, the U.S. could be connected to the release of COVID-19, and it's 2 years in. But again, we don't really hear this information until it's way too late. So again, that's why you got to follow people like Lua, who I'm going to talk to in the near future. We're going to talk about Nope, which we're both going to see. So Lua, Professor Flowers, we're going to be talking about Nope in about a month. I forgot the date exactly, but it's going to be in the beginning of October. So follow Professor Flowers. Also, Lord of the Rings just doesn't have black elves. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. It does now. So we're going to talk to Lua. Luna, Oi, and myself and a bunch of other folks are going to be speaking next week, Saturday, at 2 p.m. Pacific on Luna's channels. We're going to have a international Black, Indigenous, and people of color table discussing what the hell is happening in the U.S. and the UK and the West generally, and also things like decolonization. What does that mean? So look forward to that. Danny Haifong might join us from Black Agenda Report and the Left Lens. So we might be getting Danny, although we're not confirmed on that. But we're trying to get Danny last time, but we just got a little date time confusion. So we're trying to get Danny this time. Anyways, yeah. Anyway, so that's the end of the stream. It's 2:00. Long story short, watch The Woman King. Do not listen to these racist clowns saying boycott Woman King. This is a bunch of nonsense. The people that have boycott Woman King, yeah, it's suspicious to see everyone saying Woman King because of Oya Empire and the Kingdom of Dahomey were involved in the slave trade when similar critiques of our flag means that Hamilton have been challenged or ignored altogether. Oh, that's the other one I wanted to say. The people who are saying boycott Woman King have like MAGA, Second Amendment, American flag, white icon, white face, or sometimes it's a black face, a black face on a white person's account that's saying boycott Woman King. So that's really interesting. Also blackface and racist. But anyways, and the last one I wanted to, this is the one. Is this the one? No, that's not the one. Where is the one? Oh yeah, this one. Watching Hollywood movies is, somebody said, as someone who loves the historical action epic, The Woman King is unlike anything I've ever seen before. An empowering, vigorous, and special achievement of all involved. Viola Davis is commanding Titan, while Tusu Medu and Lashana Lynch equally stunned. Dazzling costumes and score. And it's getting good reviews from people who actually care about movie and cinema. For racist review bombing shithead, ex Gamergate, ex Brexit MAGA people, they're the ones that are mostly saying boycott the movie. Watching Hollywood movies. So somebody said also, I can't watch The Woman King now because the tribe it depicts participated in slave trade. Now, excuse me, while I watch 40,000 movies about the British monarchy. Right? It's like, who benefited the most and participated in the slave trade? All of freaking Europe, especially Britain. So if you watch The Crown, if you watch any of the movies, they're the ones who did the most of the world slaving. Hello. But also, watching, by extension, right? If you're saying boycott Woman King because some people who might have been involved in slavery were involved, Hollywood movies is also war crimes by extension because the United States participated in the slave trade. Duh. In fact, all Westerners should immediately emigrate into the sun in protest of their country's atrocities. Right? Do you see the ridiculousness of boycott a black produced and starred movie about African history? You see how ridiculous that is? Because they might have done some bad things. They might have, some people might have been involved in the slave trade. Everything in the U.S. installed slavery in Libya in the last 10 years. So by extension, anything about the United States. So that's event. No, you can't watch no Avengers. You should boycott Avengers, boycott Marvel, boycott everything. Everything that comes out of America is Americans in it, and America participated in the motherfucking slave trade. So but this and that. It's just, this is racist white people trying to say black on black crime. That's what boycott Woman King is. It's racist white people saying, one time a black person shot another black person, therefore you should never shop at any black business. Right? Not let's look at So fuck those people. Go watch it. Watch this movie. Watch it 3 times. Watch the movie 3 times just to, own these clowns, and also make sure that more of these movies gets made. Now, if you be careful with COVID-19, obviously, but just throw money at them and then, watch it when you can. Just donate money straight to the next Woman King 2 or whatever. Anyways, that's the end though. Actually, before I'm just gonna show my trailer real quick, and I'm gonna go drink a water, and then I'll close this thing out because my throat is so freaking dry. Anyway, if you like that, here's a game about decolonization of indigenous people and fighting in a different way. It's called Indigistar.
For eons, the indigenous Edo-Ora people lived in peace on their planet, in harmony with nature and each other. Hunter-gatherers sprouted into villages begot cities, yet millennia passed without war. Over time, the Edo-Ora built great civilizations while maintaining the Garden of Eden, the mother homeworld which birthed them. They blossomed up toward the stars, sailed Hokuva'a, starships, across the galactic Silk Road, trading with other peoples. Now, the unhealed descendants of Roman trauma, the utopian empire arrives to eradicate and plunder. The mother Aina desecrated, the relatives broken, the water of life poisoned. Kailatu, a peace officer of the cosmic tree, must heal land and people, prevent colonial erasure of native language and culture, and confront the invaders before it is too late.
Yeah, so if you like that game and you would like to support, also, we have lots of games like speaking of women warriors. Again, Decolonators is a game where you play a warrior, a women warrior, fucking fighting and actually beating and defeating and kicking out, Euro colonizers, specifically the United States. In Decolonators is another game, but you can get Indigestar, you can get Indigestars over here. Somebody said they liked the song. Oh, by the way, we reached the goal of 300. So I extended the goal to the new goal is $600. So the game is it's not bad for a game I spent about a month and a half working on. It's not. I didn't spend like multiple years on this, but it is to make back enough to pay for the time. It's probably like I don't know $3,000. I don't know. But anyway, continue sharing the game if you want to get it and help us reach the goal for the game that I did write. Animate, paint, the art, and do the programming and music for Indigestar. So if you like that game that you just watched the trailer of, you can get that over here and support us here at the Silver Spook Hui. So now I reiterate what that word means. Hui is a cooperative with no landlords, no bosses, or political collective action to benefit all the people. With no unjust profiteering or leadership. So Neofeud and Indigestar games made at the Silver Spook Hui /cooperative here in Hawaii. And so it's 100% organic, artisanal, indigenous made video game. Somebody said they like the music. If you like the music, you can find the music at my Bandcamp. It's called Silver Spook Bandcamp. silverspook.bandcamp.com. Oh yeah, before you go, don't forget to like the stream. And if you didn't already, because that really helps out. I was trying to watch other streamers. They're like, oh yeah, you got to tell people to like the thing because it does help the algorithm. Don't forget to like the stream. And if you like that music, I put that song that's from Indigestar in this album called Indigenous Aloha Civilization. That song is called Wayfinders. It's number 3. And so when you buy this album, you can also get that song if you want to do that. Just because some people said they like that song. I did make that music as well for the Indigestar trailer, and you can also find other music like the rest of this album, an album talking about warriors of the land back. That's about indigenous decolonization of Turtle Island. Indigenous Aloha Civilization is a song about the story of Hawaii's successes and history that I elucidated in the later part of this stream. It also has songs about not needing a bunch of white saviors to save the world, but rather people need to look inside and fix their own problems. Set Me Free, New Silk Road is a song for the Belt and Road. Initiative, Warriors of the Land Back, and Don't Fear the China, obviously. So if you like that, we also have this album was called Tanky Authoritarian Genocide Denial by a bunch of racist white people. So that was a lot of fun. Thanks for that. But if you like cyberpunk, I have an album just about cyberpunk, and we also have colonialism. If you like metal, we have Colonialism is Going to Hell, about indigenous people kicking a lot of asses, and the so-called demons beating back colonizers and setting fire to capitalism and imperialism, etc. So it's a much more. If you like the metal music, then that's the. If you like what's her face, Will Smith's wife, Jada Pinkett Smith. Jada Pinkett Smith is a black metal artist, a black artist who makes metal music, and so that's like more like in that vein. Anyways, you can also help us out by becoming a Patreon patron at patreon.com/Neofeud. consider what the consider what these streams are worth to you. How much education and entertainment value is there per month? Is it worth the $1 a month, $3 or $5 or whatever amount per month you can't afford? Consider supporting us, and it does help us continue doing the work that we do. If you become a patron, I give like at least monthly updates about all the things we're doing on top of the streams. It's like all the things we're doing at the Silver Spook Cooperative, where we're doing indigenous plural crop farming and agriculture, restoring the land, environmental work, housing, the international indigenous led and BIPOC panels, making of other games. I'm making like 3 games at one time all the time, and lots of other work that we're doing. And Holly is also working with me to do. And so when you become a patron, you get insight on that. You also get access to the Silver Spook Discord, and you get to help us out. And it really does help. So if you can afford it, absolutely do help us, because we can really use it. Our goal is like $750 per month, and we're like $200 away from that. The first goal anyway, that will help us, worry less about all of the bills that we constantly worry about. So really, we appreciate all the patrons. You can also follow at Silver Spook Games at octodon.social and at Silver Spook Games at mastodon.social for my video games related stuff on Mastodon, a decentralized, non-capitalist, federated, open source platform. You can also, I forgot to bring up Neofeud. You can also, if you don't like, you can also get the games like Neofeud on Steam, where we have the site, and also you can get, if you can leave even a very short review of the game, that is like Stray, but it's not a cat protagonist, but cyberpunk. It's like Disco Elysium, except it's indigenous and cyberpunk. If you can leave a review of Neofeud, it is massively appreciated. It does help the algorithm serve the game up to people when they're browsing the site. Also, you can... Oh, I forgot to do it. I'm like all out of order, but that's all right. Woman is a book that Holly wrote, my partner, who's in this stream, obviously, and moderates here as well. And it is a book about by a woman raised in right-wing evangelical Protestant Christianity. It is not a historical retelling of the Bible, but it is a kind of critique of that culture in a work from the perspective of Mary about the story of the Bible. So consider checking that out. You can get it for free, or you can name your own price and throw us some support when you pick it up, if you so choose. Also, you can follow us, obviously, on Twitter, at Silver Spook Guy for my personal account and my personal takes. You can also follow on Instagram at Silver Spook, and you can follow on Facebook, Silver Spook Games. And for the game stuff on Twitter, at Silver Spook Games minus the E in silver, because I ran out of characters. And also, you can follow things like Terminus C, which is a cyberpunk it's a cyberpunk RPG. I'm the content director and the lead writer of about a low poly cyberpunk Deus Ex System Shock-like game that is done with the exception of optimization and content and testing. And this game is coming soon, so be on the lookout for this game. And you can join the Discord if you want to do that. Follow Holly at the Tech Fairy, mod, voice actor, and producer at Silver Spook Games with me, moderator, producer, and writer for Xanattack of the Lounge, which it was good to see a bunch of people from the Silver Spook world in there. Strin and Real John Doe and McLovin, a bunch of people that I see in the streams and stuff were inside of this stream. Holly does write and produce this stream, or write and produce for this stream, and it's coming again on Tuesday at 8 Eastern time, and I will be in there at least for some of it again. So yeah, so don't forget to check that out and see Holly's show. Soon there will be the game another game working on, Pigeon with Gun, is coming soon in less than a month. So I gotta finish that game, and it's set in the world of this show. So yeah, so that's another thing that's happening. So don't forget to check that out. Follow Holly, follow the Kate Nix account, and McLovin's in there. Thanks a lot, McLovin. Glad that you enjoyed the show. I'm glad that I was like, wow, look, people were like using, I think it was this trend. People were like using Silver Spook emojis inside of this show. I was like, oh wow, well that's cool. I'm glad that we could get that crossover there, because I think there is a lot of crossover there. It is a show of for the queer and the ACAB and I would say I'm kind of a weird, not usual person. So it's a show for people like that, and a lot of liminal digital cabaret enjoyers. So there's a lot of crossover there. So I'm glad that we could cross that over. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Thanks to all these people on the list of the Patreon patronage patrons. And yeah, we will be back in the evening for more stuff on Twitch at 9 Pacific. But until next time, you know, watch that. If you're like, I don't know if I want to go in the theater, just buy tickets for the Women King and then like watch it later on whatever service that you can get it. I'm sure it'll be streaming one day. Just support the show. Don't listen to these clowns over there. Don't listen to mega communism clowns. Don't listen to boycott Women King, white people doing blackface clowns. And you know, just Eurocentric media and fiction and nonfiction hurts all people, including the people of Euro descent. And so we have to have more of these kinds of shows and nonfiction in the world. So thank you so much, and keep your mirrors polished, be excellent to each other. And yeah, I'm gonna get me one of those Women King machetes. All right, have a good one.